Merrimack TV is committed to our community. From gavel-to-gavel coverage of town and school board meetings to updates on town services and projects, we aim to keep you connected.
Good morning, I'm Kyle Fox, Public Works Director for the town of Merrimack.
Hi, I'm Diane Trippett. I'm the town clerk tax collector for the town of Merrimack.
I'm Captain Matt Tarleton with the Merrimack, New Hampshire Police Department.
And keep the public informed of every motion.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
And many moments, so you can be confident that we're here for you. Thanks for watching. Stay connected. Follow Merrimack TV on Facebook.
Good evening. Welcome to the January 19th Merrimack School Board meeting. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So for those of you on the Zoom with me, please remember to take your microphones off mute and rise to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the public participation guidelines for remote learning. So because we are remote, we can't take live testimony. If anyone wants to send any public comments, please send them in the following way. You may send an email to publiccomments@sau26.org. Again, that email address is publiccomments@sau26.org. We do require your name and address for the record on such documentation. Based on the amount of information we received tonight, our goal is always to read off verbatim the comments as we receive them. If the comments become too heavy in volume, we would just have to not read public comments into testimony. It's an all or nothing proposition. Regardless, we will put all public comments in our minutes for tonight's meeting, but we would not be able to read them tonight if we can't read them all. It's really an all or nothing proposition, and we just want to be sure that we address that up front at the beginning of this meeting, should we find ourselves in that position. So Shannon, the next item on our agenda is public participation. Do we have any public participation comments? I recall seeing a couple, so if you could, please read those into the minutes or into testimony, that would be great.
Thank you. We do have 5 in our emails. However, one is missing an address. I have since reached out to that person to try to get an address before the end of tonight's meeting. And if we receive it, we'll try to read it into the end of the night's testimony. So we'll start with Lisa Mungovan, 14 Lamson Drive. That was received last Thursday. Dear Merrimack School Board members, I understand that the need for Merrimack students to return in person full time for many various reasons. I, however, am writing to you to consider not doing so for the safety of students, teachers, and our greater community. My concerns come with the larger in-person class sizes for teachers and the lack of mitigation that will occur while maintaining 3 feet or less in the schools. Teachers have not yet been vaccinated, and it is imperative to take into consideration the health of all those who want to make full in-person learning safe and effective. Many will argue students are not getting that sick in this global pandemic, which may be true, but I worry many children will bring the virus home to someone older or compromised, or a teacher may bring it home to someone older or compromised. 3 feet or less is simply not safe. Please first allow teachers to be vaccinated. Secondly, I have great concern about remote students. My second grader is thriving in remote learning and has developed such a wonderful relationship with her teacher. The class size currently for remote students allow the teacher to also help each individual student easily and also allows for students to easily participate. My concern with potentially combining cohorts for full time is a larger class size in remote learning, which will make learning so much more difficult in an already difficult situation. I also hope that the consistency of the same teacher will remain, as these relationships are so important for student education. Thank you so much for taking the time to read this, Lisa Mungovan. Second, we received this at 11:56 today. Hello, we would like to make the following public comment / public participation for tonight's school board meeting. As parents of a Merrimack third grader, we appreciate the board's efforts to return to in-person instruction at the elementary schools. However, a return to full-time, full attendance seems overly aggressive at this time when cases and local transmission are at their highest levels since the pandemic began. Compared to the hybrid plan, the full-time plan will result in 2 times the number of students in each room and 2.5 times the number of days in class. This abrupt change goes against the cautious approach that the board has enacted thus far. We ask that the board consider a return to the hybrid model with the full-time return delayed until the infection rates improve. Thank you, Stu and Kim Moncrief, 2 Fields Farm Road. Next, we have Christine Lina, 8 Glenwood Lane. Thank you, Merrimack School Board, for taking into consideration the transition to in-school learning for kindergarten through 4th grade. As an educator in another district where pre-K to 5 has been in person since September, I strongly feel that this is the best option for our youngest learners. Other school districts who are in person have been successful in keeping both our young learners and staff safe through consistently following COVID protocols. Overwhelmingly, the pre-K to 5 students in the district I work do a great job of following protocols of 6 feet distance, 3 when 6 cannot be met, in parentheses, washing, sanitizing, and mask wearing at all times. Because of the great work our teachers do in Merrimack, there is no doubt that our students will continue to be safe, and their academic and social emotional learning will be enhanced due to increased in-person learning, which we all know is the ideal environment for all learners, especially our youngest students. In addition, in districts where in-person learning is taking place full-time, there is little to no school transmission, and the vast majority of the COVID cases are from outside of the school environment. I firmly believe and have seen from experience that our students can be in school safely 5 days a week. Thank you. The next one, I am waiting on an address, and one has come in since I first gave the count, so I'll include that as well. The next is Lee Pereira from 2 Heidi Lane. I'm writing as a parent with 3 children currently attending fully remote school here in Merrimack. As it is unclear so far whether or if the changes coming will affect the schedules of fully remote learners, I'd like to ask that the board make a serious effort not to further disrupt these children's school year with further changes. My eldest is a high achiever at the high school and was already forced out of the school part-time in order to have access to her AP classes. Due to the delayed start and compressed schedule, she's already working hard 6 to 7 days a week and has no further time for extra Zoom classes. My middle child is getting just what he needs from remote instruction now and would not benefit for further disruption. And my youngest has special needs and is especially sensitive to scheduling changes and uncertainty. She is thriving at the moment and would struggle to adjust again if her week was changed at this point. In a year that has already caused a significant amount of stress, loss, change, and uncertainty for all our kids, I strongly request that the board not further change a remote system that is working. Thank you, Lee Pereira. And then finally, I have from Brian Townsend, 5 Mary Meeting Drive. Dear Merrimack School Board, I'm writing to urge you to vote against the proposed model to return to full-time in-school instruction for grades K to 4. Instead, I request that you offer the same option given to grades 5 and up, or continue to offer the hybrid option. In August, the board agreed the hybrid option, in parentheses, in addition to a fully remote option, represented the proper balance between providing effective instruction on the one hand and protecting the health of our children and school staff on the other. Importantly, limiting the number of children in school each day allows for proper social distancing protocols that medical professionals and government agencies alike agree limit COVID-19 spread. The problem with eliminating this safe, effective option and instead returning to full-time in-school instruction is that it comes without providing parents any explanation for why now is the appropriate time to do so. Most concerning to me is that recent emails acknowledge that the district is still in the process of trying to address the potential impacts of this new proposal on existing health and safety protocols. Making this important decision without completing the process of evaluating the impacts on health and safety and assuring that a return to full-time in-school instruction is feasible under such circumstances strikes me as irresponsible. Because parents have not been provided with any basis to justify this decision, I cannot understand why a return to full-time in-school instruction is appropriate now at a time when, 1, the COVID-19 pandemic is at its height in the state, and the number of cases, in parentheses, including daily deaths, are far worse than the hybrid option was deemed most appropriate. 2, the teachers have yet to be vaccinated, and it is unclear what process will be completed. And 3, the CDC has continued to recommend strict guidelines for in-school instruction, including social distancing, which is 6 feet apart. In my view, these present realities foreclose a return to full-time in-school instruction, especially when administrators are warning that all they can do under this proposal is make an effort to keep students 3 feet apart. This is not social distancing, and it is not safe. I responded to the recent survey answering that I will send my son back full-time in school. This should not be read as a choice on my part, nor do I believe you should view responses to the survey as endorsing a return to full-time in-school instruction, because it has neglected to provide any ability for parents to voice a preference to continue hybrid learning instead. The realities of work simply do not allow me to opt for fully remote instruction. I'm asking that you please vote against eliminating the hybrid instruction, the option that has proven effective, workable, and provides for the safety of the students, my son, and staff. I understand and sympathize with the desire to return to full-time in-person instruction. However, to do so without giving parents the ability to voice their preference for continued hybrid instruction and without full and complete consideration of health and safety impacts is quite simply misguided. Respectfully, Brian Townsend. Um, and there are a couple more that have come in. I'll go until there is a lull. Does that make sense, Cinda?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. Okay. We have from Nicole Tomaselli, 11 Knollwood Drive. Hello, Merrimack School Board members. I'm writing to let you know that I am in support of a change away from the hybrid model of instruction for our K to 4 students. Ideally, all of the students K through 12 would be offered the opportunity to return to school in person or fully remote, and I see this change as an important first step toward incrementally safely making that happen. In the last communication sent to families from the superintendent, he stated that we should make improvements to our educational delivery wherever we think we can make them, and I would agree. Please be reminded that we are not alone in this struggle. Districts all over the state and country are wrestling with this staffing and spacing issues. We need to have a plan and long-term strategy that allows for as many instructional hours as possible for all our students. We need to get this done. While the hybrid model may appear to reduce our class sizes, thereby minimize exposure risk, you have to wonder where all the children are going on the 3 days that they're not in the school's care and abiding by the school's strict and safe procedures for masking, hand washing, and distancing. Every time a student leaves, quote, the bubble that our schools are trying to establish, they bring with them the additional exposure risks from the people and places who are caring for them. We are all better off keeping the bubble intact for as many days a week as possible. While some families have an adult who is able to work from home, many in our town do not. As a board, you must be made aware of the difficult choices some of our families have had to make, either leaving children home alone, paying out of pocket for additional daycare coverage, exhausting sick/personal time banks, taking leaves of absences, or shuffling children between friends and families to accommodate the 3 days a week that they are not in school. This is not a sustainable expectation to put on our families. Developmentally, to expect that any child in grades K to 4 in Merrimack schools has had an adequate exposure, modeling, or training this year to be able to do independent learning is ridiculous. Prior to the November 20th decision to go fully remote, my 2 hybrid learners had 20 days of instruction during the school year 2021. In other districts, like Londonderry, who made similar choice to go remote at that point, the students have been fully in and had 60 days of instruction up to that point. We simply cannot have it both ways. You cannot send students off to work independently when they do not have the established routines or the executive functioning to do so. We cannot continue on a path that not only offers direct instruction 2 days a week. Our teachers should not be exposed to 2 cohorts of children, maintain planning, records, and pacing for 2 cohorts, nor be exposed to 2 entirely different sets of potential contamination. All of our students need and deserve direct contact and instruction 4, if not 5 days a week. If we cannot accommodate them spacing wise, then we need to ask other districts how they are doing it. I think you'll find while our students are working independently, other districts are zooming in the room to ensure that daily contact and instruction is happening. Here's a list of school districts who are fully in, or fully remote, according to an informational poll that was recently posted to the Educators of 603 group. Salem, Hudson, Littleton, Messinic, Londonderry, Pelham, Nottingham, Conval, Sanborn, Kingston, Newton, Seabrook, Litchfield, Guilford, Chichester, Gilmanton, Henniker, Greenland, Rye, Newfound, Fremont, Epping, Groveton, Candia, Brentwood, Ware, Stoddard, Hopkinton, Hollis, Brookline, Exeter, Kensington, Newfields, Stratham. There may be well more than this, and I would be happy to do a more diligent search for you if that information is needed. I would look closely at all the precautions and procedures that these school districts have put into place to prevent outbreaks and provide clusters. Salem and Londonderry are neighboring districts of similar size and population. If they can figure this out, then we should be able to as well. I thank you each for your service to our community, as I know these positions are voluntary and thankless. You have a real opportunity to set the direction with this vote tonight, and I would welcome the opportunity to talk to any or all of you in more detail if necessary. Nicole Tomaselli, 11 Knollwood Drive. And then Caroline Harold, 31 Valley View Drive. Thank you to the Merrimack School Board members, MSD leadership team, and a very special thank you to the MSD teachers. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the adults who have worked tirelessly to make education a priority for the children of Merrimack. I understand very well that the epidemic has not made this difficult job any easier. I'm proud of the work you all have been doing, and I am pleased to know the work continues. Despite some of the public rhetoric, I believe there is no need to rush back to full in-person learning. Additionally, I am pleased with Dr. McLaughlin's communication and consideration of the variety of constituents. Thank you again, Caroline Harold, 31 Valley View Drive. And finally, Naomi Halter, 10 Everest Drive. Hello, Cinda, Jenna, Andy, Shannon, and Lori. I'm the parent of a fourth grader and a preschooler at Thornton's Ferry, writing to you to protest this switch to full-time in-person school. Data we have today does not support a return to full-time in-person school. On average right now in New Hampshire, there are 62% more daily cases of COVID-19 than there were in mid-November, in parentheses 461 to 744. The test positivity rate has also gone up by 36%, from 5.6% to 7.6%. In Hillsborough County, we are averaging 64 new cases per 100,000 residents daily, which puts us in the CDC's higher risk category for in-school spread. Our test positivity rate is higher than the state average at 8.6% and also falls in the higher risk category. Back in November, we were already seeing the effects of increasing community spread with staff shortages and student absenteeism due to illness and quarantining. We haven't yet had a chance to evaluate how these new higher numbers will affect the hybrid model, let alone full-time in person. Young children thrive on routine, and the switch will disrupt that routine for the third time this school year. Furthermore, the increasing levels of community spread are likely to cause a fourth, fifth, and even sixth disruption when even more students and staff become ill or have to quarantine. A return to full-time school will add an incredible level of uncertainty that will negatively affect our children. Changing schedules constantly is also unsustainable for working parents who already have childcare in place for hybrid. Please reconsider this decision and continue to offer hybrid. Use the next month to see what happens when we go back hybrid. Give our teachers time to be immunized and look at a return to full-time later in the spring when we are able to stay full-time. Thank you, Naomi Halter, 10 Everest Drive. And that is what I have that has a name and address associated.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. The next item on the agenda is the board review of draft proposal of revised district instruction and learning plan. Mark McLaughlin, John Forbizio, and Matt Chabanel.
So thank you and good evening. So in a few minutes, I'm going to turn to John and ask him to share his screen with a summary of the plan. But just before we do that, I just want to sort of provide an introduction that will set the stage for tonight and this item on the agenda. The question that's been raised by some is why change now? Well, we asked that question ourselves before we even thought of presenting this proposal to the board. And it goes back to something that we have consistently said to our community for months and months, almost since the beginning, when this came as a tidal wave in March and just threw us all right back on the rocks. And that was that we are facing a challenge, and like every other place in the world, we're doing our best to negotiate through it in almost impossible circumstances. But we've always promised our board and our community that we would be open to changing and refining as time goes on. We've never experienced, it's gotten to be such an old line, you know, unprecedented, but in truth, nobody living has experienced this before. And so no schools or teachers or principals or families or students currently living have an experience factor with this. And so we recognize that and have tried very hard to deliver the best education we can in the environment and under the conditions that we're in. But we fully acknowledge and have said almost every time we've spoken publicly about this that there are ways to do better. And so what our principals and our teachers have tried to do since the very beginning of this, and I think you know, it's immensely grateful to them for their flexibility, is they have tried to meet these challenges. And sometimes their modifications have been minor and tweaks and in the flow of things, and then other times they've been much more significant changes in response to the growing experience of how it feels to teach in this environment. So we have been in school. It feels, you know, it's been such an unusual fall, but we've been in school since September. And then we had a break at Christmas. And in that time, we've had crises of staffing. We've had crises of contagion, had to close the middle school for a few weeks. But we always looked at the upcoming mid-year, what high school people, if you're kind of familiar with that, we would call second semester. But the mid-year, we've always looked at that as an opportunity to reevaluate what we're doing and our practices. And it's very consistent with what we've said to the community all along, that we weren't just going to say, this is what we're doing, and we're not going to try to change or adjust or do better, that we're going to reevaluate. So we're looking at the mid-year as that opportunity to do that. The other thing that I'd say is that it's, we all, no matter where we stand on the impacts of the virus or what have you, I think we can all confidently say that we desperately want our students back. Today was the first day of the return to hybrid since our November going remote. And it was, you know, like the first day of school back in September, our happiest day we've had in a long time. Teachers are thrilled to have their students back. We are thrilled to have them back. And so it's always been our goal, but that goal has been challenged by realities on the ground. So what we are trying to do now is to assess what are the opportunities we have, if any exist, to develop a proposal that would help us to achieve that goal, or if not completely K-12, get closer to that goal, refine it. It's clear that members of the community want that. It's clear that our board wants it. It's clear that, you know, administration wants it. We want this. And so we have developed a proposal to give to the board tonight for its consideration. I will just say that some folks who've come into tonight are talking about this having been a decision. And I think it's important to reiterate that this is not a decision. A decision hasn't been made. This is a proposal. And it should be viewed by the community, and I hope by the board, as just that. Um, but in order to develop the outlines of a solid proposal, there is some information that we actually need from our community. We have no business saying, we might like to promote the idea of a full-time return K to 4 and not have any information about what the community thinks about that particular reality. So that asking those questions may have given people the impression that, well, this is a done deal. It's not a done deal. On my communication to families that came last week, we said, that the board will take this under advisement. And that's what we're doing tonight. So what we're going to do is present the board and our community with a lot of information. And it's my hope that the board and the community feel comfortable taking the time that it takes to absorb some of what we're sharing as a proposal. That was always the plan. Tomorrow, we will post the plan. It's about a 30-page plan. We'll post it on our website for the entire community to view. And my thought, and again, this is entirely for the board to decide, but my thought was that perhaps we'd review it at the meeting on February 1st. So I don't feel a pressure for the board to necessarily take an action tonight, but again, that's the board's prerogative, and I want everyone to know that we're able to we've learned to be flexible. But I think that there's a lot of information tonight, and that's how I'd like to just start by allowing everybody the opportunity to hear. I just want to offer this. I know that the board knows this, but I think for the sake of the community, there are a lot of options, right? The board could agree to the proposal. It could adjust dates of implementation. It could suggest or advise the administration to just continue its hybrid remote option. There are lots of things, but this is a complicated time. And the last thing I'll say before I turn to John is it's a complicated time that does not provide for easy solutions. I wish it did. The other thing that's true is that it doesn't provide an opportunity for all those who have stakes in this to be satisfied. It is a tragic fact of our reality. It just is. But what we are trying to do is to continue to prove to the community that we're not just saying, well, this is it, and it's going to be this way forever. And we're also trying to be mindful of all the factors that complicate an easy decision. So having said that, John, I would ask if you might now be able to just share the screen, if you could. And so what this is the plan that's going to be up posted tomorrow is a 30-page plan. What John has done, and he and I have worked on, is kind of like an executive summary of the plan for the purposes of information to the board and the community tonight. So having said that, John, if you're prepared to take over, that would be great.
You're on mute, John. Oh,
I got it.
Mute it again.
No, it doesn't like me, Andy, as you said, when you present PowerPoint, it does not like you. It goes away when you do this. All right, thank you. I had it on, and the minute I hit a button, it went off. So I apologize for that. Thank you. And as Mark said, this is a condensed version of a very long plan. So typically when I present to the board, I don't have a lot of words on the page. Well, but tonight you will see something different. There is a lot of words because a 30-page document requires a lot of input and a lot of planning. So you will see a little bit more of that tonight. Mark, I'll just lead and feel free to jump in where you need to jump in.
Thank you, John.
So as Mark said, why now for our plan? And I think when Mark said it best, it's the mid-year, and often we start anew in the mid-year in schools. It's when we do a lot of relooking at where students are, relooking at what we need for instructional improvements, and we're always in continuous improvement and with a growth mindset. So our guiding principles for this plan as we began, it was, again, and I apologize for the wordiness of this slide, but it's an important information on it, to provide a safe reentry for our students and staff and maintain healthy school community that continues to flow, following the best to the guidelines we can. To provide consistent learning and instructional model for all learners. We want consistency. To maintain rigorous and flexible learning. It's important to us that we maintain our standard and we have rigor as it goes along for our students. To provide a 4-day-a-week instructional 5 to 12 level using our 360 cameras and technology. And then to provide for K to 4 students on-site 5-day per week with an early release on Friday beginning mid-February.
As an option.
As an option. To provide support for preventative measures and promote the safety for all of our students, continue with our safety protocols in place, and maintain mandatory use of masks with our district policy, adhering to our travel policy, and observing physical distance as much as possible when we increase the student population, and try to limit our group size as much as we can. Continue to provide in-school supports for our neediest and struggling students to the maximum extent possible. To maintain the Remote Education Academy for Learning, our REAL program. To support and encourage as much as distance will allow, a sense of belonging, significance in the classroom and school community, and foster healthy, caring relationships between and amongst members of the Merrimack School District community. This is the plan. It was proposed plan for K to 4 to return to a 5-day in-school instruction for those electing this option by February 15th, 2021. To maintain full-time remote learning option for those that wish to elect that. For 5 to 12, utilize recently acquired technology tools to support concurrent learning by combining cohorts while maintaining a 2-day in school and 2-day remote model. And again, maintain our full remote learning opportunity for those that wishing to elect it through our REAL program. More information about our plan. So our preschool program, or our MEEP program, that'll stay intact as it is. Right now, it's in a hybrid model, but that will continue and flex as students turn 3 and are identified throughout the year. We'll continue to grow that program as needed by student needs. K to 4, return Monday through Friday with in-person instruction. Monday through Thursday will be full days, and then the REAL program will stay in a 5 days. Fridays will be an early release day, 12:45 of instruction and learning for all students. In the afternoon, educators will meet in professional learning teams to collaborate and plan and review data that will drive our instruction and our learning. Grades 5 through 12 will continue in the cohort model, and will use the 360 cameras and have a 4 days of concurrent instruction and individual supports on Friday. Our REAL program will move to 4 days of instruction, and again with individual supports on Friday. Friday mornings will be used for educators to work in professional learning teams and department meetings to collaborate and plan, review data, and drive further instruction in learning. Another way of looking at this is a little roadmap that we developed to kind of give a sense of what's going to happen along the way. So January 19th, which was today, we welcome back our cohort A. It was a wonderful day in Merrimack. Our cohort B returns to school tomorrow. February 5th, second quarter and first semester ends for our high school and middle school. February 8th, second semester begins for 5 through 12, 4 days a week instruction with supports on Friday with delayed opening, remote students 4 days a week, and supports on Fridays with delayed opening. February 15th, K through 4 begins a 5-day per week instructional with early release on Friday. Remote students, K through 4, 5 days a week again, and they will have early release on Fridays. February 22nd through 26th, we have winter recess. March 23rd, end of second trimester for K to 6, and April 16th, end of third quarter for the high school and middle school. So implications for elementary beginning February 15th, 2021. Student, class, and teachers may change. This is due to the fact that we did a survey, as you know, and that if we have a lot of movement between remote and those that choose to go remote or those that choose to come back from remote, we will have difference in classrooms and some changes based on size. Mask policy remains in place and masks must be worn at all times and on the buses. 3 feet for social distancing, as you know, as we've designed, that we'll try to keep that in place as much as possible. Bus routes may change if there will be less social distancing on the bus. Also, minimum 2 per seat. Possible increase in the number of close contacts. That is a possibility. We know that this is a risk. We bring kids back. We bring more kids into the student. We have more adults around the students. There is a possibility for more close contacts. 5 days of school instruction and early release on Fridays. That is a definite impact. Continue custodial cleaning in the afternoons. Afternoons we will sanitize. Continue to offer remote option and discontinue the hybrid option. Consistently of daily health checks by families is prioritized. We need that to happen. We need this partnership with our families and our community. We need to make sure we're having health checks. Staff absences remain to be a challenge. That will be a challenge as we move forward. It is currently and it will remain to be a challenge for us as a district while we're still in the.
John, if I could just interject just a minute.
Yep.
Part of the reason that we built into the plan this reference to implications and why we wanted to focus on it tonight is precisely because of what we're asking the board to do. The board is having to consider, something pretty substantial, and it's as well as our community. And so we want to be very clear and as honest as we can be, about what the implications of this are. So it would be easy to say, oh, it'll be fine, but it wouldn't be honest. And so we're trying to be very clear. We wouldn't put forth a proposal if we didn't think that we could achieve it. But it's also important for everybody to understand that there are implications with every choice. Should we remain, hybrid? There's less contact time. Should we go full back? Let's just be clear-eyed. It stands to reason. The question is, what's the right course? So I just want to be really clear. We're trying to be as open about what the implications are as we can, so that decisions, when they're made, can be done in the context of as much information as possible, rather than just spinning it, just to look just so. So, thank you, John.
Yeah, and again, this plan and everything here will be up on our website tomorrow. I just want to restate that, and it's a 30-page plan with a little more detail and a little more data that supports some of these reasons. And I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that too. This is tonight, again, just an overview. So, consequences and benefits of the plan, of our proposed plan. Consequences of proposed plan. Limited social distancing opportunities for our students in grade K to 4 in the classroom, buses, etc. Reduce social distancing from 6 feet to 3 feet. And we continue to talk to the elementary principals, even after the surveys come in, can we still maintain 3 feet? And it is our goal to do that. Granted, with the younger learners, they sometimes are active and sometimes like to be next to each other, and they are, 5, 6, and 7, and 8 years old, and that is sometimes that is a challenge, and I want to be very upfront about that. That 3 feet is still a challenge. Possible increase in size in some live or remote classrooms based upon choice of students and availability of staff, particularly in grades K through 4. It's going to be, that's what we're waiting on that final data to know exactly what our class sizes look like and how we're able to either adjust or use our staff in creative ways. Possible changes of teacher assignment in order to accommodate families' requests and maintain reasonable class sizes addressed associated with safety of kids. And that again is about, that's definitely a consequence of what we're trying to do. So, and again, benefits of the proposed plan, more instructional and learning time for all of our students, and social and emotional connection in our classroom 5 days a week. Again, concurrent learning 5 to 12. This is something that, you know, that anyone can look up and go out and do some research on. Concurrent learning is a thing. It was not an original something that Merrimack created. There's other districts that do this, and it's also something that's been around for a little while at the higher ed level. And I encourage people to go and look and learn more about it. Concurrent learning is designed to provide a hybrid format. It's face-to-face and online students. And it adds the flexibility of participation for students, allowing them to attend both face-to-face, synchronized with the class sessions, and complete course and learning activities online without being there in person. And it really is be able to teach kids both in front of me and those at home. Educators provide an instructional structure to it, content, activities that meet the needs of the students participating in both the class and online. These are not necessarily completely separate set of activities and are typically not at the same time. Activities are both typical for students to participate, but they set activities in different ways so students can learn them either fully participating together or separately participating throughout that. No matter what participation format we use in those concurrent learning sessions, whether we're asking kids to work independently at home or we're asking kids to do a group work together with, amongst themselves in the classroom, and then homes doing independent, we vary those. But all of those presented effectively and professionally by the teacher. They engage learners in the activities, and they use authentic assessments to evaluate those. So it's important that when this happens, it's not all stand and deliver, but we're varying our activities. We're doing a lot of different things to help kids both engage together and then work separately. I want to be clear that it's not 6.5 hours of staying there, staring at the computer and just watching the classroom. This is active learning. So the technology that we bought, we were able to utilize some COVID funds that were released by the federal government, and we bought video 360 cameras for each of the classroom grades, 5 to 12. We currently have these in place now and available. The cameras are plug and play, so there's no software involved. They have an external speaker, and they're able to work like a webcam that's more flexible for teachers, and it creates a link between the students and the learner concurrently, both at home and in school. The benefits: easy to install and use, allows for the operator educator to aim the camera at up to 6 different present locations in the classroom, choosing to allow more options for what's shared during the class. For example, if I'm in the back of the room and I'm instructing and I wanted to go point to the front room to see the board, something I wrote on the board, I press a remote, it goes to that spot. If I want to turn back to me, I press a remote, it comes back to me. It allows me to utilize the camera, move it around, and allows me to be able to instruct well the cameras in the classroom. It allows us to maintain that link from home. Populations and kids in school. It allows for 5 days of live instruction for us and happen concurrently. It eliminates the educator need to reteach the same lesson twice during the week. We will at the high school 2 days, their classes that meet twice a week. We'll have 2 days instruction. The classes that meet at the elementary level and the middle school level will have 4 days of concurrent instruction. And that's the idea. Challenges for educators to learn how to operate these new devices and adapt and use them in the current format and style. I just want to comment here for a second. We have been putting in place Canvas for a while this year, a new learning platform. It takes some distance, 2 to 3 years to make that transition. We've done that within 4 months. So again, Nancy Rose and her team and iLearn New Hampshire have done an amazing job to help us implement that in a fast pace and get that in. just like the use of these cameras. We need to be careful here. There can be no expectation that they'll go in on a Monday and be used fully on a Tuesday. And I just want to be very clear to our educators who are listening at home. The expectation isn't that it happens all on the first day. We will learn this together as we have all year. We'll do our best to implement them as the third quarter goes on. For educators, there's also a risk to educators to observe at home. We're all mandated reporters, and often going into someone's home, you see things. You may need to report these to the authorities if you do see things that you may see in the home. Also, we're exposing kids in the classroom to what's happening at home with other students. That's a risk. For educators, there's a greater exposure for their practice. It's going to be someone watching them. My fear is that someone is, another person behind the student is in the background that may critique or may have a comment or things like that during the class. It's going to be a change in environment for us when it comes to the fact of a different way of teaching in our classroom with others at home also. And I just want to point that out. Mark, do you want to add anything to that this time?
Yeah, thank you, John. I appreciate that you said that. So those challenges are real. It doesn't mean that we've determined that they're make this impossible to achieve. But I want to go back to something that we've said consistently since last March, and that COVID is a community problem. It's not just the school's problem. It's a community problem, and this is only going to be resolved by the community working together to make it work. And so these, our educators are putting a lot on the line every day by coming into our schools, by working in conditions they've never worked in before, and by really meeting every challenge we put before them. And this is yet another challenge. And so I think it's important here to say that our community has to help its teachers to execute this plan in a way that preserves everybody's integrity and right to do their job. And it's going to cause us all to have to practice different skills than we've practiced before. But what's the greater good? We're trying to achieve a greater good, which is maintaining safety while bringing students, more students back into the classroom. And I'll say more about this in a minute, but there might be questions out there. Well, why wouldn't you introduce cameras in the K-4 classroom? Well, the obvious answer is that it's very difficult and really not connected to any best practice to have a kindergarten, first, second grader in front of a camera for multiple hours. And so that's the most obvious answer. And while we're at it, how did we determine that it might be more likely to be possible to have students return full-time at the elementaries, but not at the upper grades? So to that, I will just say this, and we can get to it quickly, but it gets back to this larger issue. Our early evaluation is that it's more likely that we can create the social distance required of us in order to bring students back at the K-4 level than it would be at the 5 through 12 level, just by function and virtue of class size. And so that, coupled with the evidence, which is in the plan that John has alluded to, that will be posted tomorrow, that talks about the science of viral transmission based on information we have, appears to be considerably less at the younger grades. Now, I'm not suggesting that there isn't room for disagreement about that. That's for later. But if the question is, why would we not be offering the same alternative elsewhere? We're trying to articulate that that's the reason, based on our analysis right now, particularly of our ability to maintain social distance. We think we can in one cohort. We think we cannot in another cohort. And so in the cohort where we think we cannot, the video 360 technology is our best answer to addressing the challenge of increasing contact time and maintaining the safety. So thank you, John. Feel free to move on.
Oh, come on. Oops. So. Okay, thank you. And then why early release on Friday? And I think that in Merrimack, we hold our high standard for quality education for students. We have not lessened that standard, even in the midst of this pandemic. We have really worked hard, and we haven't been faced with a situation before. And we really need this PLT time to allow us to continue to meet the level of rigor required and to help our students make advancements. It's an opportunity, where we plan collaboratively, and we are very, they're very important to each other. Plan collaboratively, work together. It's important that we have our educators together to talk and work in collaboration time with both our special education, our administrators, and all of our educators to get together and look at what our students' needs. We talked about the mid-year. It's an important part we often look at every week with our PLTs about where are students, where are they progressing, what are their needs, what are their like groups, how are they reading, how are they able to do and work through our math program. It's important we keep that data and we continue to adjust our instruction to meet their needs. During PLTs, teachers get together weekly. They review this data and they analyze it. And, it's important that they also look at our essential standards that we have took, and we have our competencies, and we've worked all year to really have essential learning competencies. This is an opportunity to look at and say, where are we along that scope and sequence when it comes to our competencies? And where are we when it comes to the fact of meeting our students' needs based on those? And where are students progressing? We also introduced a new elementary report card this year, and we'll continue to work towards that to meet those needs and assess those needs of students. So why else? Why is it different this year? And why do we ask for that early release on Fridays to be able to do that? Well, due to staffing patterns and staffing protocols, we can't get kids together in large groups like we have in the past. In the past, we could do things like having our unified arts teachers possibly work with the students at a period of time and work in either large areas, take them to the gym, take them to more of a community meeting where we bring kids together. This year, we're not allowed to do that. Our unified arts teachers have a very stretched schedule this year. They typically would provide some enrichment activities during that time. This year, due to having having students in cohorts and students remote, they don't have the schedule time to be able to do that. In a typical year, teachers have much more collaboration time planned. Across this year, we've implemented as we talked about earlier, our essential learning competencies, and in our instructional model, we've had to take some time to really look at those and say, how do we use these ELCs? How do we implement them? Where do these correlate to our new report card? And then how do we meet the students' needs along the way? It all goes together, all of those components. And that needs time, and it needs dedicated time for our teachers to be able to do that. And again, one of the other factors that I just need to mention, we have been extra cleaning, extra sanitizing, and fogging our buildings at night to keep them clean and safe for our students to come back during both where we were in a hybrid model. Now going to full-time education in our proposal, we're going to need to have those buildings cleaned and fogged every night. That means our educators need to vacate the buildings right at the end of the day. There isn't time at the end of the day to do this. There isn't time in the morning because kids come right off the bus right into the classroom. there isn't time during recess because teachers are covering recesses and being with students throughout the day because we can't put them in large groups again. So all these factors lead to having to find dedicated time, and that's why we are proposing that we have an early release at our K-4 level during this proposed move back to full-time instruction. What safety protocols will be in place? So classrooms and buildings, school bus transportation cleaning. Buses will load from the back and the front. Students must wear masks at all times. Assigned seats with siblings of multiple children from the same family. Unload from the front to the back. Unload from the back, front to back. Windows will be open when possible. Food service, what will we do in food service? Students may eat in the cafeteria or other assigned areas, sitting at least 3 to 6 feet apart. We're going to try to maintain that. Sometimes we may utilize classroom delivery to provide to help us extend and have less kids in the caf. Dave Dzicki and Matt and Tom Tuso have been working on this. I think they met today with the elementary folks to try to work out how will it look if we come back full time. What will that look like? Utilize outside space as much as possible once the weather breaks. Restrict all visitors, parents, vendors, and vendors included. Only allow essential access to our buildings. That will maintain. Schools are closed for all non-school functions and after-school activities. That's a must to maintain as much as we can the pure environment that we have. No assemblies or large group gatherings. Maintenance department will provide schools with all cleaning supplies, as well as hand sanitizer stations and in every classroom. Additional cleaning, frequent methods, cleaning during the school day, and deep cleaning at night, as I talked about. High touch point cleaning, handrails, doors, anything inside and out throughout the school day. School operations, masks will be worn at all times, mask breaks will be allowed, lunchtime removal of masks when eating only. Classrooms should be arranged to maximize physical distance between students. Again, this is 3 feet in our elementary, and we will try to maintain the 6 feet in the higher grades in our cohort model. Assigned seating required. Individual chairs and desks should be arranged so that students are spaced at least 3 feet apart when possible. Water bubbles are shut down. Students are encouraged to bring filled water bottles to school. We will provide some water, but we're asking them to bring it. Hallways were marked with social distancing and markers. We're maintaining that. And then meals in the cafeteria and classrooms and other areas in social distancing where students are seated with classroom groups. And we will maintain to clean all of those areas. Remote Education Academy for learning. As we said, I'm not going to, it's a pretty involved slide. I will not read through all of this, but I would just say that we will continue our model of Remote Educational Learning Academy. We are dedicated to this. We think it's important. We've had good success with this. Bill Morris, our real coordinator, has jumped in this year and put all of his effort into making this a successful program. He continues to work every day. Bill and I communicate multiple times a week, and he's bringing new resources to both his teachers and his families when it comes to this. I think we have a good thing going here, and I'm very positive. And you will see by this slide, Bill has laid out for us a very clear plan where he will continue with instruction with 5 days a week for elementary schools with early release for K-4, and allowing time during the day for even part of the day for play and for recess that will happen at our K-4s. At our upper, that we will have delayed opening on Fridays, but again, 5 days, and same thing through middle and high school. There's a lot that will happen there, and we'll continue to access our supports as needed, and Bill will continue to make improvements with that program as we move forward. The only change really that you need to know is that we will break down the cohort model, and we will go to continued instruction 4 to 5 days a week. Mark, anything else you want to add about that before I continue?
I think under comments tonight, I'm just going to ask you maybe briefly to talk to the board about Commissioner Edelbluth's visit to Merrimack Academy. But that's important that the board and the community hear about that. But for now, no.
Thank you. So again, these are some important dates. I showed you the roadmap to do this, but this is was broken down a little better format, and this is in our plan that will be posted online again tomorrow. January 19th, 2021, cohort A returns. The 20th, cohort B, which is tomorrow. The 19th to the 5th, we will stay in our current cohort model in place, allowing for 2 days of direct instruction and 2 days of extension. Individual supports will continue to be in place. February 8th, our second semester will begin. February 8th through the end of the school year, 5 through 12. This is our proposal. We'll continue in the cohort model, and we'll utilize 360 cameras and have 4 weeks of concurrent instruction and individual supports on Fridays. Friday mornings will be used for education to work in professional learning teams and department meetings to work collaboratively and plan and look at data that drives further instruction. February 8th through February 12th, cohort models stay in place for K through 4. And again, all real program students, 5 through 12, move to 4-day-a-week instruction and individual supports on Fridays. Friday mornings will be used again for education work professionally in those professional learning teams. And we will also support our students individually. February 15th to the end of the school years, K to 4 will move to a 5-day per week in-person instruction and learning model with early release on Fridays. Friday afternoon.
I'm sorry, John, to interrupt, but you've said it a million times, but it's just worth repeating. These are proposals, right?
Yep.
So just bear that in mind. These are proposals.
Thank you. And I'll keep saying proposed, and I will try to, if I don't, please remind me, everyone. So again, Friday afternoons will be used for educators to work professional learning teams and collaborate and plan. February 15th through the end of the school year, all real students K to 4 will move to a 5-day per week in-person instructional and learning model with a release on Fridays. And again, Fridays will be used again to plan and work collaboratively and connect with those teachers that are out of the building and in the building. February 2nd through 26th, winter recess. March 23rd, and again, this is tentative, end of the second trimester for K to 6. April 16th, end of the third quarter, 7 through 12, and again, April 26th to the 30th, spring recess, and then the last day of school in 2021 is still to be determined based on how the rest of our calendar plays out for the year. At that point, I'm going to ask questions, and I will stop sharing so we can all see each other. Okay, and now can I answer any questions from the board?
Any questions for Shannon?
So I know you're saying this is proposed, and I think Mark also led with the recommendation based on everything. There's a strong understanding that hybrid is going to give us the social distancing that we're looking at, increased cases, all of that. So the proposal, it sounds like, is in response to some of the feedback at our table, and not necessarily, again, it's not your specific suggestion. It's just you're trying to give us options and what the actions and consequences of those options would be, but not necessarily saying that this is the way. If you just did not have, if you had the final say, you wouldn't necessarily choose this based on the risk of transmission that can happen. Is that what I'm gathering? Because I definitely understood how you're going to implement the pros and the cons, and of course the cons are definitely prevalent. But that's something, like, at the end of the day, it's one of those things that I feel like I'm asking the question at the doctor's office. If you had to make the decision, what would you do if it was your health?
Yep.
So it's kind of the question I'm asking you. If you had to make the decision right now,
Yep.
knowing what you know, the data that you have before you, knowing what you have for even student data that you've been measuring year to date, if it was your decision to make unilaterally, what would you make if, say, you were my doctor? So I'm gonna throw it in you like you, and since you're Dr. McLaughlin now, it feels so bad.
Yep. No, I appreciate it.
So Mark, why don't you begin, and then I'll just add after you're done, if that's okay with you.
So, given all the conditions that you just laid out, if I were to make it unilaterally, probably my recommendation would be, at a minimum, to get a little bit more experience factor right now with sort of the vaccinations rolling out and delay the implementation of K-4 a little bit longer than the proposal that we've put out. That would be my recommendation. I have been pretty, I think, well known for, and some people I think have not liked it, for being kind of conservative about this approach, meaning, being mindful of the virus and our obligations to students and staff. So the hybrid model has been one that I think we've been able to meet that promise. So, that's where my head is at. But I also know that we have constantly talked about improvement and trying to continue to do better and to make more offerings. And so that's what we're doing. I'm just one person, and that's my thinking. I want to be very clear that, we will do the will of the board, and I know that the board, is always takes things very carefully and under advisement, and nobody associated with decisions takes these decisions lightly. Nobody. And so, they're hard, but does that answer your question, Shannon?
It really does. I mean, I think we all are trying to find what's that perfect optimal learning environment, but then again, change in some of those things that you're talking about, changing teachers, that won't create an optimal learning environment either during a transition. So, even with the return to school options that were presented, they come with some detractions.
That's exactly right.
And to that, that's, change for change's sake is not always good change. So, it's more so than not, it's usually done out of a response instead of a reaction instead of a proaction. And so, that gives me a lot to think about. And I know, John, you had a couple thoughts as well. I didn't want to cut you off from that.
No, thank you. And I think you mentioned surgery, and you go to your doctor, and it's pretty important. That's how you brought this up. And sometimes, you can have surgery right away. You can go to PT, and you can try alternative methods first. And this was a surgical approach to look at and saying, how will we propose coming back, and can we do it? So the answer is, can we enact that proposal that we put forward? We believe we can. The question is it the best to do right now is the question I'd pose. And as a doctor would do if you asked them, should we go in for surgery right now? And well, I don't know, maybe we should try other methods first, and maybe we should wait a little longer. Maybe we should try to see where other environments around us happen. And I think Mark did mention, we're on the cusp of some vaccines coming out, and we're just at the beginning stages of that. We don't know how long that will be, although I'm hopeful. And I think that it is a place that I'm looking to see, how does that enact, how does that affect the environment we're in right now? And only time will tell that, and a little more time than we have right now.
Yeah. My knee jerk, just to share, is we appreciate you taking, some of the board's feedback to come up with what would that look like, and the consequences and the benefits of that. And my gut just from tonight's presentation is, I feel more inclined to maintain the status quo, stay the course with the hybrid and remote. But that's just my gut from tonight. But I'm interested to solicit some more input. Obviously, we've been getting some in public comment already tonight. As we read before we started this presentation. But my gut check is, I think we have some stability right now, and there's value in that too. And kids are learning in their new environment and adjusted to it. We spent some time adjusting to it. So, but that's my gut check. But I appreciate you taking the time to put this all together and give us options that give us a well-informed way to move forward. So we knew all the things before us.
Thank you.
Thanks. I saw Lori and then Jenna.
So I think our decisions need to be based on the learning needs. It needs to be scientifically based. It doesn't need to be an emotional response. Dr. Fauci has urged school districts across the nation to get kids back into their classrooms. And our school districts across the country are taking the lessons that we have learned during this pandemic, and we have a common goal, getting kids and teachers safely back into the classroom. And right now, the public health experts point to research that demonstrate our schools are not a vector for COVID-19 transmission. Teachers are slated to be vaccinated in phase 2. So I'm not really sure why we wouldn't want to get our kids back in school. And we're saying some kids would never go back to school this year because vaccinations are here. Police officers, nurses have been vaccinated. Elderly people are starting to be vaccinated next week. We make the vaccinations in New Hampshire. They're waiting for people to be vaccinated. I think that we are going to be asking the governor to move up teachers to be vaccinated. Most schools nationally who started the year remotely have gradually phased in getting our kids back to school. I think the K-4 option, 5 days a week, we need instructional time. Instructional time matters. The pandemic is still here. We have to be flexible. Things are subject to change. We need to be aware of the data. You know, a lot of the school districts are looking at the dashboard, new cases per 100K over 14 days, new hospitalization, the test positivity rates. Those are all data points that we can use to open our schools or close our schools, and we need to do that. Social and emotional learning is often cited in keeping our schools closed. However, research does not support this premise. Reopening our schools is critical for the social and emotional well-being of our students. We must take the lessons learned in the past 6 months, and we need to be able to open our schools safely. It is critical, and I know we can open our schools safely because, you know, some of the parents that wrote in, and I know there was a survey. I know parents have signed, a survey, and we haven't gotten that data, but I know that they want our kids in school. They want their kids in school, and I just really think that we really need to listen.
I have, just as an aside, after Cinda, whenever you want, I forgot to summarize the survey results. So whenever you're ready for me to do that, I'm happy to do it.
Do you, is everyone okay if he just does that now? I think it would, to further the discussion, I would rather you just did it right now. So we're able to get those results. And it's the parent survey that you are going to summarize for us, because that was one of the questions I had written down to ask you. I didn't hear them.
Yeah, it was meant, I had meant to include it as part of the presentation, and so I'm sorry. So John and I and Matt met with the K-4 principals today, and so I'm going to give you a high-level overview, and then, if you want, we can go school by school. But a couple of things I would say, for the most part, we have close to 100% response rate. Not at every school. One of our schools in particular, we're waiting for, I think it was 39 families. So it makes it, again, difficult to know for sure, because based on the responses of those families, it could shift class sizes here and there. But in general, our response rate has been really, really excellent. So what's interesting is that what seems to have happened K-4 is that in the aggregate, there is essentially no change. And by that I mean families currently remote, for the most part, are asking to stay remote. And families currently hybrid are wishing to return full-time. Now, in every case, there are examples of, let's say, at a particular grade level, 4 families who were remote now are asking to be in full-time. But it tends to be a wash, because at that same grade level, maybe 2 families who were full-time are now wanting to be remote. And so that's why I say in the aggregate, that's the result. So what we didn't see is, an exodus away from remote to full-time or vice versa. So in the aggregate, across the three schools, across the grade levels, we have essentially the same numbers of families who are who were remote, who wish to remain remote, and families who were hybrid, who wish to go full-time. So those results were due in last night, and our team is currently evaluating class size impacts now on K to 4 in-person and remote. Our early analysis, and again, a little bit more time, our early analysis is that based on most of the in-person class sizes, our administrators feel confident that we can maintain that 3-foot social distance based on the numbers that we have. That's the feeling of our administrators today, bearing in mind that we just got these numbers and we're needing to take a little bit more time to evaluate them. In those cases, an individual grade level at an individual school where we have an in-person class size that would make it impossible to achieve the 3-foot protocol. We are working with our administrators to see if we can be creative in our staffing to make an accommodation that would reduce a class size. So we're actually having a meeting on Friday where by that point our administrators will have had better chance to really process the numbers and figure out what are the class size impacts for sure, and then have the conversation about staffing adjustments that we can make to accommodate for that. So I just want to end by just summarizing that as a rule, the impact is essentially unchanged from what it was. We don't have a dramatic number more people wanting to be remote than before, or full-time than we're hybrid. That is for now.
Could you just read the counts for me, please, by school?
So when you say the counts, you mean, just let me know what you mean.
Yeah, so it would be just the totals, right? So out of the families that have been surveyed, X number said remote, X number said.
So so those hard, what do you call it? Those raw numbers are right now, they're being finally counted right now. So I don't have those for you, Cinda. I can tell you that what we have is estimates of class size based on those if you want. But I can get those numbers to you probably as early as Friday. But again, I just want to be sure these numbers just came in yesterday. There's a quick analysis today so that we could be able to summarize for the board whether there was an exodus to one direction or another. But the actual numbers per class, per building are something that we're going to need just a little bit more time to compute.
Oh, I just meant the survey total. So,
I'm sorry. We have about a 100% response rate at Thornton's Ferry, almost a 100% response rate at Reed's Ferry, and we have probably an 85 to 89 response rate at MES right now. So we're looking for just a few more responses at Mastricola Elementary School.
Okay, so what you have in front of you are the percentages, right? You don't have the out of X number of families, let's
I don't have that for you at the moment, no.
Okay, all right, that if you could just send to us would be great.
Yep, will do.
Thank you. And then Laura, you still have the floor.
So I just wanted to make one other point. So on a national level, President-elect Biden, in his first 100 days, his number one goal is to get kids back in school. And I just really think that that's a national platform that we should be considering.
Okay, Jenna.
So the first thing I want to say is thank you. You know, people can agree or disagree with this proposal, but it does show our community that you have listened to their concerns, that you are modifying and adapting, and you are evolving the plan as we learn and gain new information. I'm coming to this as a board member from a really unique perspective because I have 3 Merrimack students who've been participating in the hybrid model, in the go to school hybrid model, since the beginning of the school year. And I have another student, another child, my child, who has been attending a 4-day full-time since September, where I work. And I'm currently teaching kindergarten at that school, full day, 4 days a week, with a 1 day of flex day, with 19 kids in my class. So I see this now every day. I started this school year in full support of the hybrid model because I take COVID very seriously. I believed in a better safe than sorry approach at that time. I thought that was best for everyone. However, throughout this fall and winter, I've spent hours talking to parents and educators in districts that were doing full-time, particularly for young students. And what I've learned is that our worst fears of in-school community transmission have not been the reality. Educators in at least 32 districts in our state, including the many that are good comparisons to Merrimack, like Londonderry, have been doing this. And I really paid attention to that over the course. I did my own sort of personal, anecdotal research, hours and hours. And I did a lot of it with friends of mine who are educators that live in Merrimack, whose kids were experiencing what our hybrid choice, but who were teaching in other districts, multiple other districts that were doing in-person full-time. And these are people I respect and who are fully supportive of the Merrimack School District and often have been. So I spent hours really talking to people about this. My own personal concerns about this kind of plan that you're proposing right now have been answered and eliminated by those educators that live here in Merrimack, who have spent hours answering my questions and trying to tell me and explain to me and demonstrate to me that this is indeed safe. And now, as an actual teacher in a school district that is doing this in an actual elementary school in kindergarten, I am seeing that it is safe. I'm experiencing it every day. I'm looking at these kids. These kindergartners are pros. They know the rules. They follow them. They unbelievably remember to keep distance. They're better at, when I pull my mask off for to project, they're better at keeping their masks on all the time, 24/7. They're better at that than even I am. They are awesome. Teachers are fantastic with the whole routine. They're good with the protocols. They're awesome. And these teachers teach them these protocols, and these kids are pros. And what we're finding out is those protocols, the mask mandates, the PPE, the hand sanitizer I bathe in on a daily basis, these things work. They work to protect teachers. I'm in there every day doing it myself. I'm not in supporting this proposal, I'm not asking teachers to do something that I'm not actually doing myself. I understand the risks, but I think the evidence has proven that it can be done safely, and it is going to be done safely. And I echo everything that Lori said, including the fact that this is going to be a national priority over the next 100 days starting tomorrow. So while I wasn't on the school board at the beginning of the school year, so I wasn't part of making that decision to start the school year hybrid, but I was fully in support of it. And I think because I have watched and learned, and I've allowed others to share information with me, and I've been able to learn from them, I have come to realize that I really do think that, especially for this K-4 population, this is a viable option. If we were talking about middle and high school students where they're switching classes all day and they're passing in the hallways and, kissing their boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever they do in high school, that's a whole different story. We can't, that's a lot of mixing we can't control, but we can control, in a lot of cases, that kindergarten to fourth grade population. The questions that I have, so I would say I'm absolutely in support of this proposal. I'm also thrilled that you included increased instructional time for 5th through 12th grade, even though my children probably don't love that idea. But I have a couple questions. Well, two questions actually, specifically. First of all, I don't know what daily symptom monitoring has been like. It seems to me in the hybrid model, there really hasn't been much of that, as far as like, I don't think my children have to report any possible symptoms they might be having or any sort of things. I know when, my kids were playing sports at the beginning of the year, they had to do that for, they had to fill out a form every day and turn it in. I know at the school that I work at, physically, I take the temperatures of the kids every day, just, as an extra monitor. Hey, okay, let me take your temperature quick. They gave me a whatever infrared thermometer, and I take their temperatures, and I know walking in, okay, nobody here has a fever. So, maybe that's something that we can, those two things are things that we can consider as an added level of safety. And then my last question, and I'll just give you my questions and you can answer them or, get back to me or whatever. I know that there's been concern from remote parents, and in a way, I feel like you might have already addressed this by just giving us the raw numbers, but will there be changes to class size for remote students? I know you keep saying, well, we're going to be very monitoring the in-person class sizes and talking a lot about the in-person class sizes, but obviously because of virus protocols and distancing and all of that, but remote parents were concerned about this rash of people coming remote, which sounds like is not the reality. So can you maybe alleviate their concerns that their class sizes aren't going to balloon and explode and you're going to have 32 kids on Zoom in 2nd grade and everybody's going to be hating their life?
Yes. So John, I'm happy to answer it, but you've been working a little bit more closely with Bill on, So
right now, the data we have currently, Friday, I'll know more. John, will share that out. But the data I have right now, there'll be no significant changes in the size. What's going to happen is cohorts will be combined, though. We wanted to go to 4 days of instruction, so that doubles the class of what right now we're meeting in the cohort model. So, will they increase? Yeah, they won't be 10 anymore. They'll be 20. So they'll increase to that point. So the answer is yes, they'll increase, but that's with 4 days of instruction. And as I talked about with that model of concurrent learning, will we have varied activities so it's not them all doing it all in front of me and standing delivered? No. So it's going to be some, I lend to the teacher's craft in some of that, and they know how to teach their kids, and I'm good with that. And I think that they'll do what they need to do to meet the needs of the kids in that way, but they will be combined cohorts. But the overall numbers haven't had a remarkable impact, if that's what the question you asked at this point.
Yeah, I'm asking on the behalf of the remote parents that I've heard from, and my thought for the answer is exactly what you said, which is I trust teachers. I trust teachers they know they don't want 20 kids on Zoom if they can afford it. They'll figure out a way to handle that in the best way possible for the most successful learning for the remote students. So thank you for that.
Right. And the only thing that again, what has to be determined right now is based on, our staffing patterns still. And I brought that up earlier, that's still, I won't know till Friday. We look at really numbers about what's going to change in educators. Do we have to bring more educators back in the building? Do we have to switch some because of medical needs? I was very clear, and I want to be very clear to the community. There could be some change in teachers right now and placement of kids in classrooms. That's a possibility when we make this move. And I don't want people to say, well, I didn't know. Well, I'm being very upfront about that. It's in the plan. We said it in Mark's letter. I'm reiterating it. When we get to this point of looking at hard numbers and we know who's the who about our staff, because there's some change in what's the requirement, what's allowed now, for people to be out or be in school based on their own health or their family's health. And beyond that, but the child care variance that was there before has been taken away. So that's going to be a change in some of our personnel along the way. And we'll accommodate who we can, but if we can't, we'll come back into the classroom. So that's still to be determined. And Friday's that meeting to talk about that with the elementary principals.
Yeah, and certainly I think we all agree that that's not, ideal, but welcome to this entire school year, right? Nothing is ideal. And I think if there's anything, I would hope that the community and myself, I'll just say for myself, that I've learned is that I cannot have it all. We can't have it all. If we want to make a concession to make sure our kids are back in school full time, then we might have to have, say, well, a teacher switch is just what's going to happen. And that has to be sort of a reality we're going to have to accept to gain something that's more important. So hopefully people are willing to make those concessions. I know that, we'd have to be, that has to be a reality. So thank you. I just appreciate it.
If I could just, I just, what you just said, I would love to, put a box around that because you just summarized the challenge that, for every move that we make in a positive direction, there may well have to be concessions made. And this isn't our wish. This isn't like, we're not trying to take a lazy approach and say, well, we're going to go to teacher changes first. That's going to be, a last resort. But in order to achieve the greater goal, if that should be what ends up happening, we want to be very upfront right now. John said it. We don't want to surprise people, the board or our community or our teachers, by saying, well, sure, this will be fine. And then after the fact, swoop in with a reality check. We're trying to lay out all the realities, as best we can right now. While we're on that, and while we're kind of alluding to staffing, I just want to say this, that we came to the board in November, 2 months ago today, as a matter of fact, with a recommendation to go remote because of staff. And because we were at a point now, at that point, where we were the increased number of staff who are infected or close contacts that require them to quarantine, knowing that we were then within days moving to Thanksgiving and then to the Christmas holidays, and then anticipating a surge, which we've seen. And so it's a good thing we were remote during this time, because we would have had to close had we not been. Those factors, again, have to be taken into the fullness of the deliberation, because I can't have a crystal ball and foreshadow what's likely to happen in terms of, impact on teachers over the next few weeks. I have great hope that the vaccination program is going to really, kind of gear up, but we're not there yet. And so I just want to remind everybody that that is still a concern. The front page of the Union Leader today talked about staffing concerns relative to Nashville. Well, we're all looking for the same subs and for the same, and so I just wanted to, again, in the spirit of laying it all out there, that is not an insignificant challenge from a management perspective, and that just has to factor.
Yeah. Thank you.
On that same subject, I just had a couple of clarifying, if I could, Jenna. Are you finished?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. As it relates to, if I'm hearing correctly from your presentation and what you've just said, am I hearing that the fewer families that switch back and forth, the more the cohorts stay as they are, the less likely it is for children to have to switch teachers? Is that true or not true?
I think it's a little premature to say whether it's true or not. It might sound like I'm hedging, but I'd rather hedge than say one thing and then have to come back to the board of the community and say, forget what I said. So we will be able to have a much clearer answer to that question when we meet on Friday. as a team. So,
Okay.
yep, and we'll certainly share that.
Okay, and then the other question that I would have along the same vein is, and it sounds like you'll probably discuss this on Friday as well. So if you can kind of take that back and, come back to us with responses on this as well, is would, parents be able to, make a choice based on whether or not their kid will switch, right? So if I know that my child, and is remote and I want that child to go in school full time, is it fair to assume in that situation, it sounds like it could be that automatically they would change teachers by making that switch.
So how I want to answer that is this. We have a step. So let's go back in time just a little bit. We have established a protocol for families to request cohort changes. There's a form online that people can go to, and they do that. It's settled down a little bit, but that happens even now. And so there is that form. We put that form in place because at the end of the summer, we were finding that people were withholding their final decision about what they wanted to do, to the point where it became really hard for us to schedule anything because we had so many people who hadn't announced what they wanted to do. So what we said was, we're going to have to pull the trigger and be kind of hard and say, you got to name it. So we can slot you and schedule you. And then if you wish to change, then there's a process for that. So that's how that happens. So what I'd say to you in answer to your question is that we certainly can make that available to families if we find out that that a staffing arrangement would move a teacher from a student. And I want to also, in the spirit of just full disclosure, say that as much as I'm sure members of our community would like to be able to, be able to switch back and forth and so on, I cannot tell you how really damaging that is en masse to the ability of our administrators to have anything approaching a functioning schedule. Because these are delicate balances right now, absolutely delicate balances. And a lot goes into that planning. And so, yes, we're going to do our best as we have to accommodate. I'd like to be in cohort B, A, and so on. But the public has to know that at a certain point, it disadvantages the system, not just for inconvenience of administrators. It disadvantages the system because then it presents the possibility that we have to, really upend. Now we thought we had a class size solid here and we're balanced among the classes, and now suddenly we're like this again. And when people talk about consistency, think of that as a part of the consistency issue. So at a certain point, we got to just kind of name it and stay with it as much as we can. So that's kind of a both sides of my mouth answer, but that's the reality. We will certainly try to adjust to people's requests, as long as people realize there has to be a limit to the number of times that we can do that, because it's a detriment to the system.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Andy?
So first thing, so your presentation intertwined two concepts tonight. One was the back to school in person proposal for K through 4. The other was the change in approach to 5 through 12 in the way that you're going to handle instruction by using the 360 cameras and things like that. And I think that, and also the timeline for implementation is different. The timeline for change and implementation for those changes in the semester model grades is more along the lines of the beginning of February, whereas the proposed timelines around the K through 4 is more mid-February, right? And obviously there's a lot of discussion that we've had so far is really around the K through 4. The first thing I'd like to do is, I don't know if there's a question for administration or the board, but I'd like us to be clear on whether we're accepting the approach that administration is proposing for the higher grades to use the camera to increase the instruction time, to get a lot of the things that we've requested while maintaining the hybrid model and the remote model. So I don't know if that's a point of order, send it to, sort of to you or to whatever, because I want to make sure that, because that has a tighter timeline, because next time we meet, you will have been in implementation of the beginning of that part of the equation.
So may I just answer something that Andy said?
Yeah, of course.
As a way to help maybe frame it? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
So Andy, I want to just describe why there would be a tighter timeline for 5 through 12 versus, maybe the return of K to 4 full time. And that's because let's just focus on the high school for a minute. Right now, what we're proposing is the joining of cohorts to provide some instruction to students who are in person and those who are home, and so if that model is to be adopted, administrators at the high school really need to know that very soon, so that they can then begin to plan for that reality. If we were to delay that decision, which we can do, but I'm just trying to say the consequences, what would happen is it becomes more problematic because we have to slot students into classes. And so if we're going to start hybrid, because we got to have students do something as second semester starts, that presents the problem that I've shared with the board over and over again, which is that we can't undo a hybrid schedule and then redo it now that we're going to introduce the cameras. So that's why that time frame is a little bit tighter, and it really has to do with the exigencies of developing a schedule.
Right, and the reason I'm saying this is because you stated earlier that you wanted us to digest all the things that we're hearing back from the surveys and the plan and everything, and then come back at our next school board meeting, which I believe, if I'm looking at the calendar, is February 1st, right, which is the date that you want to start the second semester planning for, or approximately the date, right? And what I'm hearing you say is you need to give especially at the high school, but probably at the middle school, time to plan. If we delay that part of the decision, then there's no time to plan.
So thank you for that. I think so. You're absolutely right. So thank you for sort of helping me fine tune the request. And again, it's whatever the board decides. We were referring to a delay on the board's decision relative to K to 4. That we don't need you to act on immediately. So thank you for the clarification. And if the board felt like it needed more time for the other, then we'll do what we always do and figure it out. But yes, you're right. Clarity on the 5 through 12 part of the proposal, would be helpful. So I'm sorry I didn't make that more clear, but you're absolutely right. That is a fact. And John, I saw your hand, and I just don't want to step on because you've been really working this. So go ahead.
No, I just want to comment. February 8th was the date that we'll start at the high school and the middle school. It's not February 1st. We still had a week after that, Andy, just to give you the date.
Right, but so I knew it was about. I for some reason the first stuck in my mind, but even if it's the 8th, if we decide on the meeting on the 1st, that gives you no time to plan for your second semester, right? You need that extra 2 weeks of runway to be able to do an adequate job and be able.
That is true,
right? So, I mean, I guess the question so now I'm going to avoid the K through 4 because you've heard a lot of the discussion, and there's certainly different points of view across just the board members you've heard so far. I think that it's really hard because I've been the advocate for doing what you're proposing for the 5 through 12. Introducing the cameras, increasing the The instruction time, I mean, you've given me on a platter what I've asked for when it comes to those higher grades, right? So you hear me want to start that process sooner versus later. I may be in the minority on the board, but the reason I wanted to do it is I'd like to have us as a board for whatever remainder time we got right now to decide whether we're going to address that tonight. I mean, obviously the K through 4, I have some thoughts, but right now I want to focus on the other part of it, given where we are in the meeting, because we're already got almost 2 hours into our meeting, and I want to make sure if we need to make a decision on something, we do it early enough in the meeting so that we can have level heads about it, right? So I don't know. I'm sort of go to you, Cinda, is how you want to handle this part of it and get sort of the temperature of the board on this part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the reasons that we wanted to, I guess I'm open to thoughts on how we would want to do this. It's, if we want to separate out the proposal and make a motion on one of them tonight, or if we take the whole proposal and then deal with it on our next school board meeting, which is February 1st. Any thoughts from the board on that? Jenna?
Well, I mean, having 2 high school students and having heard what they just said, I think the reality is, I think Andy's right. I think we have to separate it out at least. And I think we have to give them an answer tonight on 5 through 12. So, does that mean I have to make a motion?
Well, I'd love to hear what everybody else thinks about that. Let's do the temperature of the board before we make a motion on this, right?
I mean, I'm distinctly middle of the road. I have personal feelings, but I know how the community feels. The community wants increased instructional hours. The model that the administration has come up with will address that, and I will support that.
May I just make one other suggestion?
Sure.
And that is that it's not unprecedented for the board to have a special meeting for the purposes of a particular issue. You've done it many times when it comes to food and so on. And so we're trying to be very flexible here too, and we've given the board a lot to think about. And yes, it would be very helpful to be able to run starting tomorrow, but tomorrow's Wednesday. So if we were to, I'm just throwing this out, take this under advisement, just the 5 through 12 piece, take it under advisement, and perhaps have a special meeting of the board next Monday, just for the purposes of this one item. It wouldn't have to be a long thing, but maybe I'm just saying, if you're being very kind to administration by giving us, wanting to help, and I'm saying I want to try to come back and say a little bit more time, we can make that work if you'd feel better just having a little bit more processing time.
So I'll tell you what I think is, I think it's very important to get our public feedback, from parents as it relates to this piece for 5 through 12. So I really am uncomfortable rushing to the decision tonight. And I think that's, what I'm trying to grapple with is I think, if anything I've learned, so far this year is, we need to listen to our parents and our staff and teachers as it relates to some of these decisions. And we need to give them some time to be able to provide their input. So I'm perfectly fine with that approach of maybe looking at next week, Monday, to deal with this one particular item, if the rest of the board is, to be able to, again, let parents, respond, who may not be watching tonight, but may hear about it. And again, at the same time, what I can tell you also is I'm, from what I've seen, it looks good to me. So I'm leaning towards that. Yes, go for it. And so I don't know if it helps, to not slow some of the planning. If maybe there's just, even a pulse, if there's anyone on this board that at this point feels that they're very opposed to it, maybe just, raise your hand real quick, to the plan for 5 through 12. And, Lori, I don't know if you want to just kind of state some of your concerns.
Well, I think that my concerns are teachers are going to be vaccinated. And so I'm not comfortable saying 5 through 12 is going to be in this model from now until June. I think that fourth quarter would be a good time to hopefully get kids back in school. And so, looking at the data today versus the data in April, things are going to shift and change. So I'm not comfortable making a decision for the entire year on January 19th.
Jenna?
If we were to go to this, if we were to make the, middle ground first step into this model that they're proposing right now, where we start semester 2 with the cohorts combined. I mean, I can't see John. I gotta switch to the view so I can see John and Mark's faces when I say this. But then would it be an easy transition to do what Lori said? If everyone's vaccinated and we're looking at something else for fourth quarter to make the switch to, okay, we don't have to do it that way anymore. We could then bring them back full person. If John passes out right now, I could just go ahead.
All right, John.
No, I'll repeat the things I've said before. There's so many pieces to the puzzle. We don't have additional pieces, and I've said this a lot. I'm sorry for repeating myself, but any move you make, there's a strain and there's consequences to that. So nothing's easy in this pandemic time. That word does not exist. I think that we will continue to work. We'll plan. We'll work together. We'll figure out what we need to figure out, and if to that point, if we're at a place when, we're all vaccinated and we're different and we get different orders from our government that steps up and says something, we may be in a different place.
Yeah, and I agree. I wouldn't want to close the door, to that option for the future, but certainly if we can increase the instruction time sooner rather than later, that would be my preference.
Feels like a smart first step.
So I'm sorry, Andy.
No, I just wanted to Lori's point. My proposal is not to say it's one and done for the rest of the school year. It's that I don't want us to sit here and not take a step in the right direction. I mean, there's nothing to say that as we get closer and things change, we couldn't visit this again and evolve it. But if we stick with where we are today and don't change it, I think it'll make it harder, and we will have done a bit of a disservice to our students in this gap time between now and when we make that decision. So that's
so I appreciate it. It's very important that I just say this. We can do a lot of things when we have enough time to plan for them. What we can't do, and I think anybody who's managed would know this when it comes to schedules and stuff. It's very hard to upend a schedule midstream. It's really hard to do that. And so if the board, so let's play this scenario out. If the board were to say that we would like the administration, assuming that the numbers support it, to return 5 through 12 full time by date certain, the beginning of quarter 4 or whatever. And we know that now, we can bake that into the plan. What we can't do is have a plan that says, well, this is what we're going to do now, but we reserve the right to come back and say change it for next week. That I just want to say right now that does not work. So probably that all the more suggests that the board might benefit from taking a little bit more time and maybe coming back next week. What I'm telling you as an administrator in the district, is that our team can do an awful lot when it has the time to plan for it and has clarity about what is and isn't up for grabs. What we can't do, where we try to be flexible, but it is very hard to have the board tell us in March, hey, we want you to bring your kids back because it all seems better. If we haven't baked that into the plan at the beginning. So that's why right now, the time that the board takes to consider, what it prefers and how it wishes to guide us, the better, because, then we can operate that way. So it's for those reasons that I continue to talk about having some certainty, because not just for teachers and for students, but listen to what some of the families are saying. It is disruptive to them to build their whole family model around a certain set of expectations and then have to redo them kind of on a moment's notice. However, if the board were to say, this is what we'd like you to do, then we can tell the families, okay, so by April 1st or whatever, this will change, assuming that the circumstances on the ground allow for it. It wouldn't be ideal, but families would have several months to say, okay, we know this is coming, and they can plan accordingly. So that's part of the rationale for trying to, say, let's just plan long term. I know fully that things can change, and probably for the better, and I hope to God they do. But we're trying to plan, for a scenario that creates as much stability as we can create. And so that begs maybe the idea that you would wait, and that maybe we would discuss it again, that particular portion on Monday. Maybe.
So I would just say, like, for myself, I don't know that it would be any different for me. I mean, my reason for wanting to wait is to allow the time for the feedback. But as far as being able to commit to the end of the year, I don't think I would know any more next week than I do right now. I don't think I'd be comfortable saying, hey, we need to rule out making any changes. However, I also will say that I would never come to you and say, you know what, next week, let's bring everybody back and come to our community and our teachers with that kind of but I think that if we can be open to, obviously, our goal at the end of the day is, to work through this pandemic and get everybody back with lessons learned. And, we all want that, but I don't know that I feel comfortable that saying that we absolutely can't do that by the end of the year. Now, I have, reservations here on some level on different items, but, I would be very clear to say, I don't think we would come to you and say, okay, things are great, let's go next week. That would be just a huge, that would be very disingenuous and very irresponsible, quite frankly. So I just wanted to be clear about that. Lori?
So what I heard the superintendent say is, if we feel strongly enough that we want to get students 5 through 12 back in school, possibly based on the evidence, based on vaccinations, based on all of those factors, if we state that now, that's our goal, that's what we would like to have happen. So our proposal is, we're going to accept the changes for now, with a goal of possibly, looking at the data, opening up schools fourth quarter.
I think you heard me right.
Okay.
That's one option. That's one option. And that, what's helpful about that, again, not to beat it to death, but is because if that would be the guidance, then we can bake that into the plan. So I'm hesitant to go too far down this without, letting Mrs. Putney and Mr. Zampieri and Mr. Bergeron and Mr. Carragher and Mrs. Demore talk about it. But I will just say, in rough terms, this is one way it might go. If right now the proposal is to start semester 2, we have this model of combining cohorts using the cameras. So you're creating a class, you're basically creating a class that exists. They're a unit, and some are at home during it, and some are in school during it. And so theoretically, and I really want to say theoretically, because people way smarter and better at scheduling than me are probably listening, throwing up, hearing me. But I would just say that theoretically, the class, that unit, if the circumstances allowed for it, that unit could then be, that just, come in now. You can just come in because it's scheduled as one class. Now, I'm going to stop there because I'm saying things I don't really have business saying at the moment, and I want to be deferential to the principal and her team. But that kind of thing doesn't strike me as impossible. So
let's go ahead and revisit that next week. Is there anyone who wouldn't be able to make a special board meeting for that one item next week, Monday at 7? Okay, we'll handle that that way, and then we will. And what I would ask too, Dr. McLaughlin, is if it's at all possible to separate those out, because we're kind of separating them and how we're dealing with them to make it easier for those that might be following at home. If it's not too difficult to do, if it is, and it's going to be time consuming to kind of put the recommendation for, each of those groups, then that's fine, don't. But I think that if we can post it that way, that might be helpful, for those that want to follow next week and then again the week after.
Got it.
Cinda, can I ask a question?
Sure, of course.
Just for clarity for people at home, so next week we will just be focusing on 5 to 12, and the following week, February 1st, is when we will talk about K to 4 return plan.
Yep, that's
right. Correct?
Yep, that is correct. And next week will be a special meeting only to address one item. The following one is our regularly scheduled school board meeting. To be clear on that point as well. Okay,
thanks.
Andy.
I want to take 30 seconds to chime in just on my thoughts on K through 4, because I derailed the conversation right in the middle of what everybody else is talking about. So this thing keeps evolving as weeks go on, as a month goes on. We're talking about today about something that will not be in place until mid-February, right? If you believe trending, if you believe the way things are headed in the good direction now. I'm under no pretense that it's going to stay that way, but right, we have hope that it's doing that. The issue that I have isn't so much whether we do it, but the timing. If you look at a calendar and you look at the 15th of February, that would have students back in school for a week. Then they're gone for a week. Then they're back. So if we're going to make this change to go to a full back in, it might make sense from a consistency standpoint to make that change after kids get back from the February break, or at the beginning of the third trimester, because I think that's the beginning of March. Isn't that what the date is? Something like that for the third trimester for elementary school kids, something like that. It was on your Wiggly roadmap, right? So part of one of the discussions that we need to have when we double click into this in a couple of weeks is not only whether we do it or not, but align on the time frame. Because while I agree with Lori that we want to get them back as soon as we can, I also am mindful of what I've heard from some of the parents that consistency is important. And making a big change and then for a week and then you're gone, then they gotta get used to it again. I think that might have some negative or some backward leaning effects. So just something to think about as we get into the discussion.
Okay, John.
Just March 23rd, Andy. That's later that's the end of March. Just so you know that date.
That would be too far out then. So that's fine. But it's good to know all that data so we can make these decisions up front. Right.
So to also reiterate for the public, if the decision ends up positive for K through 4, where we pull all kids back into the buildings, the very earliest that would happen would be March 15th. It would not happen any earlier than that if the board supports the.
I think you mean February 15th.
February. Sorry, I know you said March.
I was on mute. I was screaming. February
15th. So that would be, just over, not quite a month away. And it would be 2 weeks later than our meeting. So roughly with the extra day. That's the very earliest if the board supports it. If the board has the option to also pick another day or not accept the proposal or a myriad of other choices. But I just want to be clear that people aren't feeling like, it's going to happen, right the next day. And I know you said that in your presentation, but, again, I'm trying to alleviate any anxiety that people listening at home might have by reiterating that point.
That's very helpful. I appreciate your reiterating. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay. I have a couple questions. One of them is around the 3 feet, trying to maintain the 3 feet. So I went to the American Academy of Pediatrics site, and I looked at some high priority strategies of dealing with COVID. And one of the things that it said there was that desks should be placed at least 3 feet apart and ideally 6 feet apart. And then it also has a comment on there that said if it reduces the amount of time children are present at school, harm may outweigh the potential benefits. So what I interpret that to mean that the American Academy of Pediatrics feels it's more important to have kids back in school with the 3 feet, potentially at the minimum of social distancing versus the 6 feet. And so I wanted to take a minute and just talk a little bit about the 3 feet, and also I think have a conversation about it so the public can hear too, right? So we would do anything we could to maximize the space as to at least 6 feet. But however, I think in your proposal, we're not going to measure it out so they're only 3 feet apart, right? We're going to try to take available of any space in that room to try to maximize the amount of social distancing we can do. So I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about that and any protocols that we might have to help encourage and maintain social distancing in the classroom.
So I'll start and then I'll again tip it to John. So this is again another one of those cases where it's really important to be honest and straightforward. If we go with this proposal, I don't think there is any scenario by which any K-4 classroom would have 6 feet. And I just want to lay that out there now, because it's better for the board to know that, because that's going to be a factor in its decision. There is no scenario where we could achieve 6 feet. We wouldn't have brought this to the board if we didn't think that we could maintain 3 feet, which is the minimum standard, and the minimum, and it's an allowable standard too. So that we are much more confident about. And let me say, we were not confident about that 5 through 12, which is why we didn't even go there. But K-4, we are. John and Matt and I had a conversation with the leadership today, the 3 K-4 principals, that went so far as to talk about, are there any movable items in the classroom that could be removed to provide more space? So let's say a bookshelf that could temporarily just go in mothballs so that we could use the space that inhabits. So literally right now, the team is looking at that as well to even maximize. It also is important to say that one of the things, and this is something that I don't expect for a minute that people will necessarily all agree with, but there are 2 sides of an argument when it comes to instruction. One is that no matter what, class time, contact time, face time is the most important thing. That is a very defensible position. There is an equal position that I don't think is any less wrong or right that says that just FaceTime, if you can't teach in the way that we are training our teachers to teach, doesn't necessarily produce the benefits that you would hope. So one of the things that we are really good at in Merrimack is small group instruction. That's particularly at the elementary grades. And it is very likely that that small group instruction will have to take a back seat to more traditional instruction if we're going to have more students in the class. So we might have to remove the comfy chairs that students sit in for small group instruction because we need that space for more students. So again, like we've said all along, with every plus, there's a minus. We have, so in those districts that have made the decision to have students be FaceTime, you can't be under the impression that the instruction is as intimate as we have been able to have it. So there's a plus. We've been able to get to know our students even better. We've gotten a lot of feedback from teachers and families that they've never felt more connected to their teacher because of the smaller class size. So I just say that that is also a factor for the board to consider. That is really a true thing. So the idea of FaceTime is the bottom line is certainly an argument, but it's not the whole argument because there's another side of that story too. So Cindy, long-winded answer to your question, yes, we feel very confident that we can achieve that free feet. We'll have more to share next Monday as a stopgap between then and February 1st. But it comes at a price, like everything does right now with COVID time. Everything with a little plus, you have a little take. So I just want to take this opportunity to lay it all out so that we're not fooling anybody.
Matt.
Yeah, just to mention about the 3-foot distance. K through 4 ride together on the bus for Reeds, Thorntons, and MES. We've been trying to do with the hybrid model like 1 to a seat. We've been able to do that, but depending upon how many parents choose to take bus transportation, it will more than likely be 2 to a seat. We'll make every attempt to allow siblings to sit together because they're together in the home anyway. However, that may be something that we can't really kind of contain, to have one kid to a seat. More than likely, in the period of time that they're on the bus, some kids get on first stop, some kids get on last stop. There may be instances where the 3-foot rule is not adhered to. So that's something to think about also.
Okay, thank you. And then, I guess, the other thing I want to say is, I thank you for putting this together. Thank you for putting forward a thoughtful plan that we can contemplate and get community and feedback from, not only from parents, but our internal community as well, our teachers, our staff, that also have strong feelings about how we might go forward. So I want to thank you for that. And I also, wanted to just say another reason that I think it's important to allow for just this time to be able to reflect on what you've proposed is, right now is kind of a transition day for a lot of families and a lot of staff. They've been fully remote. Many of them probably forget what it was like to be back in the classroom. Not really forget, but, their sense of security may be families' sense of security, teachers' sense of security, and our staff sense of security may be lower from having been remote and, having some of the holiday spikes in COVID. So I think this gives time for people to get back a little bit into their normal routine, the kind of semi-normal, the pre-remote normal, kind of a new normal, not normal at all, but I think think you know what I mean. So I think this just gives everybody a chance to just digest what's been proposed and kind of think through it thoughtfully for themselves as well. So again, thank you for addressing this important topic, and we will move on to our next agenda item, which is the presentation of suicide prevention and response plan and policy. That's John Fabrizio for Insighten, Dr. Bob Walrath, and is it Sio? Did I say it right? Sio Fuller.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sio.
Sio, thank you. And first of all, thank you for your patience while we went through kind of an intense and long agenda item. And I know you've been on holding since then. So thank you for that. And I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. I have the pleasure to work with some amazingly intelligent people who not only in Merrimack but in the state and beyond, really bring some expertise to our district. And the three partners I have with me tonight are those people. I think that they took this project on seriously when a law was passed to really look at how do we bring this to Merrimack and make it something that we can help support our families, help further our connections, help really take a very scary topic and bring it to something that's doable for our district, something that will make us better once our plan is instituted and put forward, and something that will help ultimately help save others. And I just commend them for their willingness to be here tonight and to partner with us as a district and really help move this forward. So I'm going to turn over to our system of care coordinator, who is just doing an outstanding job. And I'm going to turn it over to Fern and let her talk about her two partners and begin tonight's presentation. So Fern.
Great. Oops, way back here. Good evening. Hi. So I just first want to introduce Bob Walrath. He has been in our district for 28 years as a school psychologist, so he brings a great wealth of expertise to this topic and has helped us tremendously. And Sio Fuller, who is our social work intern this year for our office and in some of the elementary schools. And she's also happens to be an inpatient counselor at the Greater Nashua Mental Health Center. And so she deals with this topic all the time. So tonight we're talking about the implementation of this statute that was passed in the summer, July of last year. And it really directs the development of a policy and a plan. That's this. The statute is very simple. We're going to talk about all three things: the statute, and then how it influenced our policy, and the actual plan, which is really the meat of the importance of this statute. So I first wanted just to take a minute to talk about the importance of the process and our committee. So we had representatives at all levels of our school, from every school or from all levels, elementary, middle, and high school, and many different roles, including health teachers and school counselors. And what we did was just sort of looked at the law and then reviewed different model plans and policies. And we also vetted trainings together, because the bulk of this work this year is really to make sure that we start training as part of the plan. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sio, who's going to take help us understand more about the law and some of the statistics that we are facing.
Awesome. Thank you, Fern. So we're going to start off the presentation with why is this important, and just really bring it down to facts. Is suicide is the leading cause of death among individuals ages 10 to 24 years old. So we have here a visual that highlights data from the state of New Hampshire. It was collected from the Youth Risk Behavioral Studies. And here is reporting 2019's results in comparison to the 2017 results. So we see a significant increase in responses in the first three sections compared to the 2017 survey, which really warrants concern and a call for action should be made. Awesome. So the law here, chapter 193J, the Suicide Prevention Education Law, was formerly known as the Senate Bill 282. It was approved in August 2019 and signed into effect on July 1st, 2020. So there are three parts of this law that we really want to break down for all of the listeners. And the first part is the purpose of the law. So going back to the data that we had seen in the original screen for the Youth Risk Behavioral Studies results, that, as I had mentioned, was for the state of New Hampshire as a whole. And when we kind of narrow in and look at the greater Nashville region, in the 2019 report, 14% of students seriously considered suicide in the last 12 months. So although we don't have the hard fact outlined exactly for the district, we're looking at the greater Nashville region, and we are seeing an increase in alarming statistic. So the purpose of the law is to reduce the number of suicides in the state of New Hampshire, more or less. So really doing the work that Bob will later explain, Dr. Wallace really further explain, to get these implementations going and to really put some steps into action to reduce the number of completed suicides overall. The second part of the law is suicide prevention. So this talks about the need for organizing and employing a policy and plan that includes training in prevention, proper responses, and confidence in responses. So really allowing for those that are being trained to walk away feeling that they have the knowledge and have what it takes to really dive into a situation if it were to come up and make the proper choices and steps to move forward. This also includes educating the students and focusing on postvention. So in the event that there was a suicide in the district, how the district as a whole would navigate that. And then the third part, we have immunities. So this section basically says that there's protection for all involved, ensuring that nobody is afraid to speak. So all in all, this law really strives to encourage speaking up and out about suicide, which I know can be a touchy topic and a tricky topic to talk about. But we really want to ensure that we are encouraging people to talk, to speak, to gather resources instead of inhibiting the conversations out of fear or making error. With the proper training and resources, we would be able to make some improvements in the overall rates, especially in the state of New Hampshire.
So that basically was like the law in a nutshell. And what we did was we took that law and we looked at some model policies and we made our own school policy out of that, which we are presenting tonight. And we're just going to give you an overview. The law will be read into the record, the policy will be read out loud. So we're just going to give an overview of some important features of that. And the first aspect of it, the most important part of the policy, is that it really directs the creation of a plan. Our policy spent some time at the beginning explaining the purpose, intent, and scope of this, following kind of our student violence and prevention policy, the bullying policy, to kind of link these social, emotionally, and supportive policies so that they kind of have some balance. So we wanted to spell that out, our purpose, intent, and scope. It suggests that we write a plan, and the plan is very much focused on the provision of staff training as well as student education and the importance of disseminating the plan. The organization, a big part of the policy is about organizing our system to support this plan. And so one of the most important pieces is that the principal of each school will have a team of people, people they designate to be supportive of the implementation in the school. And so that's a critical part of the policy. The policy also is about the kinds of information that will be shared to support prevention efforts as well as responding to situations. And a big piece of the policy also is about cooperative efforts. And I really appreciate that aspect of the law and how we have translated it into our policy and plan, is that we are not looking at the law, the real intention, you can read into it, really is trying to say schools are part of a larger community and we are really working together because the issue is so important and can only addressed in a collective manner. And so that is also included in our policy. The plan itself has really 4 parts, and it's broken into prevention, intervention, and postvention. And it's really, as Sayo referenced, it's really intended to ensure that staff have the capacity to respond to students. One of the metaphors that's commonly used is sort of like with suicide prevention is that it's a topic that often is a hot potato. So you might have a concern and somebody passes it to somebody else to take on that concern, and that person passes it on. And that hot potato metaphor is about how we miss really being able to help people and prevent completed suicides. So we really, really want to ensure that we are a culture, a community that doesn't pass that hot potato, that we know what to do and how to do it. It also talks about intervention that Bob's going to get much more detailed into, and postvention as well as resources. And again, it's really about understanding that all these things don't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen just at school. It happens across the community. As I was stating before, the plan organization, so this is the actual plan rather than the policy. The policy says make a plan, and then the plan itself is much longer and much more detailed. Some highlights of that are that the principal is designating a team of individuals who are trained in the various components of suicide prevention. There's also a piece of really organizing schools so that they're ready to be planning and coordinating the implementation processes, and that all staff are really ready and able to report concerns that they believe are students at high risk. And an important piece of that I would just want to say is that we are not, in our schools, we're not screening, we're screening, and we're not like sort of analyzing whether a student is at risk or not. We're basically providing screening and good communication with our families and caregivers. So a big and very important piece of the law, and also in our plan and policy, our policy and plan, is the importance for prevention education for students. And we consider all the SEL work that we've been doing part of that. So it's all developmentally appropriate, trauma informed. We're talking about safe and healthy choices, coping strategies. And as we get older, into the older grades, there are discussions about risk factors, what to look for, how to ask for help, helping students know when to go and seek help from adults. Probably the biggest component of the plan is about staff development, as we've said. And all staff, designated volunteers, anybody who has a considerable amount of contact with students, contracted personnel, everybody is receiving 2 hours of training And it's pretty in-depth. 2 hours is a lot, and it's every year at this point. So we are working this year, for instance, with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We're providing the More Than Sad program. We're starting that, hoping to complete it by February, and by mid-February. And the other component is that we're making sure that all the staff, the teams in the schools that are designated, that might be designated to support these plans, have been really trained and understand the safety screening for suicide and self-harm that we use when we have a concern. And just finally, just to point this out a little bit more, the System of Care and Learning Supports Committee is really focusing on collaboration with community programs and the state. We work a lot with the state. We're interfacing with the community. We have a lot of connection with, we're developing better relationships and more robust relationships with community organizations such as NAMI, that's the National Association for Mental Illness. We also are ensuring that everybody really is aware of that plan, that it's now part of our school culture and what the purpose is, and that we're all in this together to support young people and to turn these numbers around. We know that before COVID, mental health issues were a real issue, as we saw in the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and they will continue to probably be exacerbated by this situation. Finally, we would like to see, there's a part of the policy is about biennial review of the plan. So we would like to be determining what information we want to collect in order to do a good, thorough review to see where it needs, improvement over time. And now Bob is going to talk more about the intervention and postvention aspects of the plan.
Thanks, Fern. So I just want to say quickly, first, we looked at developing a plan that wasn't just meeting the letter of the law, but really, taking that and creating a tool that people could use if they do have to deal with this kind of a situation. It's anxiety provoking, it's sensitive. So we really wanted a plan that people could pick up and use that gave you the guidelines, any place in the system of what your role could be. So the intervention plan starts with assessment referral. We have a tool we've developed called the Safety Screening for Suicide and Self-Harm that a staff member could fill out when something comes up. Even though it's a suicide plan, we've included self-harm because it may not be clear if someone's actually made a suicide attempt or engaging in self-harm, which are two different things, but we would need to look at that if something comes up. Especially now with remote learning and things that go on after school hours and better times, we knew we needed to have a part of the policy that dealt with what do people do if this comes up in the context of remote learning. So we have guidelines for that. Also, guidelines for how we might supervise somebody who we think's at risk while we're getting them off to somebody who can do a real thorough evaluation of what they need, and guidelines on how do we and who do we release information to in conjunction with parents. Also, part of the plan is looking at where law enforcement might be involved, giving guidelines for that, parental notification guidelines, and also talking to parents if they do have a child who may be at risk about things like do you have guns in the house you might want to remove during a sensitive time? Do you have prescription medications that might be supervised with a child who might be suicidal in the house? So we have all these things lined up in the plan so that people can up and take a look at it whenever they need to. So if you can go on to the next one, Fern.
Okay.
So if there is an actual, we're talking about at-risk students who we're concerned about so far. If there is an actual attempted suicide, then we have plans that people can take out of this and look at how do we do in-school communication or out-of-school guidelines. It's all revolving around student safety, clear communication, notifying parents and guardians in a way that's timely and makes sense based on the situation. Unfortunately, it could be that we do have a completed suicide within the school district. It's happened in neighboring districts recently that some people may be aware of. So we do have post-vention after suicide death plans spelled out. And these are difficult times for sure. So we want to make sure that people have some really kind of a clear roadmap for that, getting the facts, looking at what we need to do and preparing for it, thinking about how we share information, being aware that ways that we share information could lead to what we call contagion, where other kids sometimes are drawn more closer to a suicidal attempt because of someone who's just done it within a district. Looking at support services for other students, staff members who may have been involved, looking at the need or not to develop a memorial plan. That can be controversial in some cases because it can lead to contagion. So there's lots of guidelines about that we can use. There's actually guidelines from the American Association of Suicidology about use of social media and use of mainstream TV like media in the event of this. So guidelines on how to kind of manage communication with the public. And looking at any plans that we need to make regarding working with parents, other students, and what kind of external communication needs to happen with, again, involving parents and making decisions about communication and who does those communications, what's the nature of the information, those types of things. The other part of the plan is having a family resource guide link, which we would put on our website. Also, we can have paper copies of that gives people resources on mental health agencies, community agencies, agencies we might partner with as a school district in looking at mental health issues for our students. And also definitions of the terms used in the plan, because we understand that not everybody has the same level of training and all with the kinds of things we talk about in mental health. So that last part is really something that we would probably add to as more resources come online and we're more aware of more people in the community that we can partner with. So there you have it in a nutshell. Tried to be quick and complete as we could be, but we're happy to answer any questions you guys may have for us.
Any questions?
Fern, can you take it off share?
Yeah.
Cinda, would you, may I just say one thing?
Sure.
I just, Sayo, I've never met you, but heard, wonderful things. But what I really want to just say to Fern and Dr. Walrath and you, Sayo, is how grateful I am on behalf of the district that you have taken this on, and though I've not been party to its development, I talked to John, and I'm well aware of the process. And what I particularly want to say is for tonight, thank you, because this is a terribly difficult subject, and it could be, and it's so difficult that it could be not met head on, or that we would fumble over ourselves to figure out how to talk about it. And you've given us a language to talk about it in a way that can lead to something positive and proactive. And that's not easy. I mean, it is really hard to do. And so you know, I just want to put that out there and thank you, because it's a roadmap for how we can be more responsive to our students, and just almost I can't imagine anything more important. So I just kind of wanted to just go there and say thank you for providing us that roadmap and a language to even begin to talk about some of these things.
Mark, we had some good people across the district working with us. We happen to be the three people who are showing up to brief you, but this was the work of a whole committee.
And you know what? Thank you for that, because I know that that's true too. And and typical for the way that committee operates is, there's a constant deferring to everybody else who's great. So you're absolutely right, and thank you for that, because it is a committee's work. So thank you.
One thing I would add, when you have a policy and a plan like this, and you're really rolling it out to everybody, is what you hope is that this creates a sense of community around this particular issue for students and faculty, and maybe makes it a little bit more comfortable, or hopefully in some cases a lot more comfortable for people to talk about this. What we'd really want to see is that students are telling us about other students who they're concerned about. And that's what that community can create, where people know it's okay to talk about this, because we all have the same language and we all have the same understanding of these issues.
Okay. Questions from the board? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming tonight and putting together a really well thought out presentation, and for such important work during such difficult times. So
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. The next up, related, is the first read of the Suicide Prevention and Response Policy. Mark McLaughlin and John Fabrizio.
So John and I are going to share this, but I think we said, John, that you would begin. And
yes, yes, I will. Thank you. Merrimack School Board Policy JLDBB, Suicide Prevention and Response. Purpose, intent, and scope. Through this policy, the district seeks to join with families and community in the important work to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its students and school community, understanding that suicide prevention is an integral component of the trauma-informed system of care and learning supports that promotes students' social, emotional health and well-being, and equitable access to education. This policy supports federal, state, and local efforts to provide education on youth suicide awareness and prevention, to establish methods of prevention, intervention, and response to suicide or suicide attempts, parentheses, postvention, and parentheses, and to promote access to suicide awareness, prevention, and postvention resources. In implementing this policy and plan, the Merrimack School District, recognizes that physical space and mental health are integral components of the students' outcomes of both educationally and beyond graduation. Believes that only through collaborative, proactive approaches can the problem of youth suicide be addressed. Pairs the policy with other policies and laws that support the overall emotional and behavioral health of the students. A. District Suicide Prevention Plan and biannual review. The superintendent, parentheses, or designee, end parentheses, has developed a committee to review the district's suicide prevention plan, parentheses, the plan, end parentheses, to include guidelines, protocols, and procedures with the objectives of prevention, risk assessment, intervention, and response to youth suicide and suicide attempts. This policy is intended to guide the development and the implementation of the coordinated plan to prevent, assess the risk of, intervene in, and respond to suicide, semicolon. The plan shall conform to the components required of public school by RSA 193-J:2. 1. Specific requirements of the plan content. The district suicide prevention plan shall include the content related to A, suicide prevention, parentheses, risk factor, warning signs, protective factors, referrals, close parentheses. B, response to in or out of school student suicide or suicide attempts, parentheses, postvention, suicide conditions, ignition, close parentheses. C, students' education regarding safe and healthy choices, coping strategies, recognition of risk factors and warning signs of mental disorder and suicide, and help seeking strategies.
D, training of staff, designated volunteers, and contracted personnel on the issues of youth suicide risk factors, warning signs, protective factors, response procedures, referrals, post-intervention, and resources available within the school and community. E, adherence to confidentiality protocols and statewide code of ethics for New Hampshire educators. F, designation and identification of trained personnel within each school to act as points of contact when students are believed to be at an elevated risk of suicide. G, information regarding state and community resources for referral, crisis intervention, and other related information. H, dissemination of the plan or information about the plan to students, parents, faculty, staff, and school volunteers. I, promotion of cooperative efforts between the district and its schools and community suicide prevention program personnel. J, such other provisions deemed appropriate to meet the objectives of this policy. For example, student handbook language, reporting processes, post-mention strategies, memorial parameters, etc. 2, biennial review. No less than once every 2 years, the superintendent or designee, with input and evidence from community health or suicide prevention organizations and the district health and counseling personnel, shall update the district suicide prevention plan. B, annual staff training. The superintendent or designee shall assure that beginning with the 2020-2021 school year and continuing annually thereafter, all school building faculty and staff, designated volunteers, and any other personnel who have regular contact with students, including contracted personnel at third-party vendors, receive at least 2 hours of training in evidence-informed suicide awareness and prevention. Such training may include, but is not limited to, such matters as youth suicide risk factors, warning signs, protective factors, intervention, response procedures, referrals, and post-vention and local resources. C, dissemination. Student handbooks will include information about the district's suicide prevention plan and how to access the plan. The district suicide prevention plan will be made available on the district's and each school's respective websites.
I'll finish out. D, statutory considerations. In adopting this policy, it is the intent of the district to fully comply with provisions of RSA 193-J and to fulfill the statutory role in suicide prevention education as defined by RSA 193-J:2. In doing such, the district does not assume any duty beyond that set forth in RSA 193-J. Legal references: RSA 193-J, Suicide Prevention Education; RSA 193-F, Pupil Safety and Violence Prevention; ED 510, Code of Conduct for New Hampshire Educators; and School Volunteer Policy IJOC, close parentheses. First reading, January 19th, 2021. Any questions? I may ask what Paul or
Any
comments.
questions? Lori?
So I think it was really well done and it's very detailed. I don't know if it would go here or someplace else, but if there was an intervention, we had a student that we asked to an at-risk student to go to the hospital and be evaluated. What would be the guidelines for returning to school? You know, would there be like a reentry meeting? So would those guidelines go in the student handbook, or would they be a part of this policy, or a separate place?
That would fall, Lori, in the plan. It's part of the plan, and in the plan, there's a part about reentry and reentry meetings in the plan.
Okay, good.
It's on page 6 of the appendix.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, we had the first reading, and we'll just continue through the policy approving process. And we will move on to item number 7, which is further consideration of proposed warrant articles. So we've approved, we've put our stamp of approval on the budget with the modifications we made, and now we need to resolve the warrant article piece. So I wanted to see if any board members had any recommended changes to the warrant articles that we've been given, or if there's any discussion that you'd like to have regarding these before. Is that a hand, Shannon, or no? No. Andy?
Okay, so I'm going to be the sand in the cogs of progress. I want to debate across the board whether we need Article 5. And I'll give you my rationale. I know we talked about wanting to do the money for one-to-one. I know it was part of the overall summary that superintendent had put together. I know we had discussion about taking the money from taxation to do this through the warrant article, but also looking for other funds. My concern is in trying to emphasize the other warrant article topic, which is the ventilation. Do we want to include both of these in the warrant on top of the support staff? One, I'm tempted, and my position, I think, is I would like to see Article 5 not be on the ballot, but I'm just one vote. So.
When you say not on the ballot, do you mean not done at all, or do you mean you want it put in the operating budget?
I believe, no, I don't want to do either, because I think that there is an opportunity with some of the relief money that we're going to get, that we could address a large part of this year from those funds. And I'd like to see us take that approach. I know it's not guaranteed, but that's sort of my belief, because it's something we can turn around quickly to be able to get some of these things that are in place. It's just my thought.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yep.
Any other thoughts, questions, Shannon?
Well, when it comes to Article 5, I think that the concern, and honestly, I'm teetering on it too. I mean, the concern I have is, no is a no for buying computers, because the intent of what you're going to use the money for, more so than it's the money itself. So, saying that, I understand where you're going with this, Andy. I really do. But the thing is, I think we learned a strong lesson in what one-to-one would mean to benefit education. The reason I liked it as a warrant article, and I think Mark mentioned it a couple of meetings ago, it is, if they say no, they still have a plan of delivering a quality of education. But if they say yes, I think that makes their job a little easier. It's a smoother path to that. So I would rather give us the opportunity to get where we need to be in this year, knowing that the answer no is, does mean that the district is prepared to respond to that and find other ways of getting the results they're looking for. Just not as easily, but still accomplishable. And that's if I'm hoping I'm summarizing Mark well when I said that. But I think we need to put out there, this really does communicate the delta that we do have, and the inequity that we do have with devices that we have been fighting my entire time on the board and even my time on the planning and building committee before I was on the board, which dates back to, gosh, 2005. So this is a never ending challenge. And now we're in a position with this pandemic that it really brought the light on the issue. And I think that whatever we can do to facilitate the what we call the ideal outcome, we should take a stand to do. So that's really where I feel on this. But I I hate summarizing other people's words when they're sitting here. So I know, Mark, you can speak very well for yourself.
No, I appreciate it. Somehow I was muted. I didn't realize I got muted, so I had to get up and unmute. No, you summarized it exactly right. I mean, in terms of my position, you summarized exactly right. Yep.
So, but ideally, I think it should stay on the ballot. I think it gives us the opportunity to communicate what value it brings to having the devices, and gives the community the opportunity to tell us what they can and cannot bear. So it's still, if they feel that it's, even if they say we understand why you want to do it, but I can't bear it, it gives them the opportunity to do that. So I feel it does what we needed to do by being a warrant, which I know we talked about putting it into the budget. I think this is the right place for it.
Jenna, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I just a question, and this is my, I'm just new enough to not know the answer to this. So I keep hearing this no means no. So if it was on as a warrant article and the town voted it down because they said, this year's not the year for spending that money or whatever, does that mean then that money comes up from the government and we can then not spend it on computers because they have said no to computers?
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard. I just wanted to be clear about that.
No means no. It doesn't.
It's not about the money, is what you're telling me. No means no.
Yeah. So that purpose is null and void, to buy computers in order to reach a level of 1-to-1. It doesn't say that specifically in this article. Well, each student a device. That wouldn't prohibit us from replacing devices. That's a different thing, replacement equipment versus new equipment. So it would keep us where we're at right now, worst case scenario. But, I hear there's a meeting sometimes this week with the state, and I'm going to try and get some information out. I keep hearing the governor saying how many, millions of dollars they got from the federal government, and I want to know what we're going to get. And I hear figures like 1.7 million, I hear a million, I hear whatever. I need somebody to answer my question for me, so we can kind of properly plan that out and what the time frame for the expenditure is going to be. You recall a little while ago, we were given by, is it really given by the federal government? Because it's our tax dollars anyway. So anyway, we were allotted, a certain sum, around $700,000. We had 6 weeks to spend it. So I wanted, and that was kind of an attempt to basically make the task almost impossible, so you would return as much back to the government as you could. It kind of box you in, but we were up to the challenge, and we took care of that. So I'm concerned with both. I understand exactly where everybody's coming from. If you put this in the warrant article and it fails, it's kind of a litmus test of what your community values as far as what it deems necessary and relevant for an education in this town. And so if they don't think that providing a device to each student is important, that sends a message.
I'm just going to chime in, because it's very possible that people agree that 1-to-1 is good, but they're uncomfortable spending the money this year to do it. Right. So that, and my concern.
I'm sorry, Andy. I agree with you. Yeah, go ahead.
No. I mean, so the whole reason, so I didn't want to say no versus no. I'm glad it means no. I'm glad somebody else said it. But after our discussion last time, and given the chance that there's going to be some money, even if we don't get the full amount, let's say we get half of that, we can still make progress to get additional equipment to get closer to 1-to-1. My concern is, and frankly, I want to talk about Article 6 because I've got a way I want to approach that as well. But I just think that given what we know may occur over the next few months, I mean, one of the other board members talked about, I think it was Lori, talked about President Biden wanting to get everybody back. Well, he's also wanting to do additional COVID stimulus packages too, which may be the way that we address this, because it's buying extra equipment is a way that we can do it, and we certainly justify it under this, this whole opportunity. So I don't really feel even like it's rolling the dice. I think there's going to be something coming our way that we can use for this stuff. So that's the reason. I mean, I'd hate to use it as a litmus test as to whether people in the town supported one-to-one and then box ourselves out from being able to do it.
So I just want to point something out that I think is relevant here. So in the budget, in the technology and library media services budget on page 6, there is a table, and I want to draw your attention to item number 6 in the table. It's additional and replacement computers, $20,000. So Nancy and Nat and I were, we really did this on purpose, and I give credit to Nancy. One of the things that the board, kind of indicated in its annual message was, try to focus on one-to-one as a goal. And so we debated whether that would become part of the operating budget or a warrant, and for all the reasons we've said before, a warrant. But Nancy, in the preparation of her budget, included the additional computers with the thought that if the warrant were to be chosen by the board to go before the voters, and the voters voted it down, in the operating budget, we have identified $20,000 for the purposes of additional computers, which would certainly not get us to one-to-one, but in Nancy's world would provide an adequate sum to continue the march, so that we would not achieve the goals of one-to-one, but it would be a step in the right direction, and it would continue to provide more access for students. And that would not be subject to the no means no, because that relates specifically to the warrant. So I just want to point out that we built in $20,000 as a way to provide additional computers to our community in the event that the warrant either wasn't included to the voters or was turned down by the voters. And that's not an insignificant sum, because Nancy's been working magic for years, and that represents, a lot of computers. Not one-to-one, but it's not nothing. And we're already, in a better place than we were a few years ago. So I just wanted to be sure that people saw and understood that that was intentional and built in there, if that gives you any, more comfort in whatever decision you're going to make. But anyway, just wanted to point that out.
I'll just close my thought by saying, I want to increase the likelihood that any money that we get, we can use. And I think if this goes and the voters vote it down, then we can't use it. I mean, that's my concern. So I'll stop talking.
Shannon, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I was up earlier. And the question really is, we don't have to make any decisions tonight and move the warrant forward, do we?
Matt, what's the last date that the warrant needs to go before?
Oh, the budget committee has a public hearing, and last date for collective bargaining and warrant articles is February 9th. But they have a couple of, when's there's the meeting on the 26th, I think.
There's one Thursday and one on the 26th.
26th, and I think the 26th is when they want to do district-wide, and they probably want to do, I don't have it in front of me, they probably want to take a look at.
We've never done warrant articles in the second meeting of the budget committee.
No,
it's always been a separate one.
It's going to be the third, yeah.
So I think, to answer your thing, Shannon, I think we need to decide by next Monday.
2 Mondays. That's what I'm saying. And the question I have for Matt was going to be, if we could actually vote on the warrant articles on our meeting on February 1st, just to add more agenda items, Cinda, because it's going to be that much more your run. being sarcastic. But with that, would that give you enough time to get data from the state as far as preliminary numbers of what might be allocated to Merrimack, the timeline to receive those monies, and the guidelines in which we have to use them? No pressure?
I'm gonna just jump in there, and I'm gonna say that I really appreciate that question, and I'm gonna say that the likelihood of our getting anything that the board can rely on to make a decision is almost nil.
Oh, great. Okay.
Thank you. I was gonna put it, but in not such an eloquent fashion.
Okay. So really, it would not help us at all to get. We won't know how much, when, and how to use it, and when we when we no longer have the access to the money, if we waited. So honestly, I get Andy's point, and I definitely do, Andy. And again, you're right. If it closes the door for opportunity for money, unfortunately, I don't think we had a fair opportunity to utilize the last round of funds. The only hope I have is that it's coming from a different federal government at this point, as far as structure and DC, but it's still going to Concord, which is also very different and not necessarily, favoring how schools in New Hampshire need to operate, based on what we've dealt with since last March. Not a lot of guidance and not a lot of direction. And again, 6 weeks, that was not fair to anybody. So with all that, I'm conflicted. I think we're both like teetering on that same side of the line, each side of the line. And I'm leaning toward having the warrant article. You're leaning against it, but with the value of having a warrant article. So I mean, if the will of the board was to not have that warrant article, I would respect that and understand it, and I think I could feel okay about it. So either or, I could feel okay about. But the fact that if there's no money coming and we didn't ask for it either, we've also decided that you can't have them. So it's I just can't find a good answer. And I feel like that's happened more this year than it has in the other 10 years I've been on the board, with all these decisions and how they're being influenced. So I mean, I'm willing to hear what other people have to say, and I hate to say I can go either way on this. It's not usually the way I work. I usually take it in and feel very good about the motion, the decision, but this one, I'd hate to tie our hands too. So I feel like there's a risk of doing that.
Oh, sorry. All right, Lori, I saw your hand.
So I was going to say, Andy, I think that you gave us a lot of, good information to think about, because we did discuss this deeply last time, and here we are right back at it. And I think everyone's in the same position, but I think I'm with you. I would say take it off the warrant article, and because no means no. And I do believe we are going to see money. So I would vote in favor with you.
I would as well.
Me too.
So based on that, considering we've got 1 on the fence leaning slightly towards it, and 4 saying that they don't really, and we got a dog vote in the background too.
Sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. Mine will start soon anyway. Do we want to make a decision now that we don't want to have Article 4 or Article 5 on the on that?
Yes. So I'll make a motion that we remove Article 5 from the ballot, the warrant article, or the 450,000 1-to-1.
I'll second it, just to give you a hint of where I might be going now.
Okay, I think, does anyone have any additional discussion? I know we've been discussing it. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? I support it. There's, this is a tough year for taxpayers. Certainly, there's a lot going on with COVID and finances. And so any way that we can minimize the tax burden, particularly, that just kind of puts me over the edge to support removing it. Okay, I'll go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0-0.
With our support to get those devices, though.
Oh yeah.
Why we wanted you to actually get them? That's really why we did this.
I think the subtle in between the lines is, when we get this money, this is something I think the board supports going after when that money is available. So.
Anything else, Andy?
So here's the other leg. I've got a two-legged stool today. So Article 6, based on the current one, which is the ventilation one. So last time when we met, Matt shared with us 3 proposals around the way we could address the ventilation. One was to spend starting at 400,000 and then increasing over the coming years to do a piece every year for 10 years to address the highest area ventilation needs within the district. He then also shared a bond, which would be $100,000 the first year and what was it, 400 something the subsequent 10 years after that. So it'd have like an 11-year stretch. And that bond would allow us to do all the ventilation work within the first approximate 2 years, but then pay for it at a fairly cheap money rate over a 11-year period. And then he had a third option, which was instead of doing a bond, we do a lease purchase agreement, sort of what we did with the gas line a few years ago, over a 10-year period, which would be $437,000 flat every year over a 10-year period. Again, allowing us to do all the ventilation work within the first 2 years and address all those hot areas in the district. And in particular, the piece that was sort of intriguing to me is that the first year of payment on the bond, on the lease purchased, would not necessarily be required in the budget year that we're planning. So in other words, if we're doing a budget year for 21-22 right now, if we're talking about that budget year, the first payment on any such lease agreement would not occur until 22-23, and then it would be for the 10 years after that. Is that, Matt, is that an accurate depiction of what you proposed?
With lease purchases, you can structure your payment schedule. You have some flexibility that you don't have with a bond. You would still have to disclose the gross cost of what the lease purchase agreement would be, but you would just raise $0 in 21-22 for
Right.
the first year's interest payments.
So
it would look a little bit confusing, but it's explainable.
So anyway, so the rationale behind this is that I'm still a proponent that I'd rather we address all of the important areas around ventilation and quality of air within the areas that have been outlined, and not wait 10 years to address them all, because it's a 10-step process based on the way Matt spread it across. I want to see this done sooner. I know we've had a couple of questions from people about scrubbing of air and purification of air with COVID and stuff. This introduction of fresh air would match some of the CDC guidelines and other ventilation needs that would certainly improve the quality, not only for things like viruses, but also for carbon dioxide and the other aspects of it as well. There's a lot of benefit to it. So what I wanted to bring for discussion for the board for this one is, instead of picking a 1-year $400,000, do we choose, my preference would be the lease or the bond, to address it all and then promote the rationale why we want to do this, to ultimately save the taxpayers money but still address the air quality within the buildings. So that's
the one thing in talking with Honeywell, the $4 million would address the worst case scenarios at each school. It wouldn't address ventilation in its entirety.
When the proposal, if we go back and look at it, it was much bigger than $4 million to address everything across all the buildings. But
it's like an $11 million proposal, of which I think ventilation was $8 million worth.
Right. So
everything.
Trying to remember back, if we take a $400,000 bite every year and do a little bit at the time, we're never going to get it done.
Right.
In my mind. So if we're going to make a meaningful bite, but still keep the cost to the district similar over this period of time, that's why I propose to do it all as much as we can up front and take advantage of some of either the least attractive offer or the cheap bond money to do this and save, because in either the bond or the lease scenario, we save, many tens of thousands of dollars to the district taxpayers by doing either one. So anyway, I wanted to ask to see what the temperature of the board is on this one. So anyway.
Okay, board, any, Shannon?
Honestly, I lean toward the lease purchase as well for the 4 million, because again, at the end of the day, we're going to be asking every year, and the numbers show that by doing it this way, we'll actually save the taxpayers money. If they, because again, we have 10 units that we have to deal with to get to this goal, and we're going to do it for less because we're going to be getting them at this year's rate versus a future year's rate. And again, it has proved itself to go down. So on that note, I think I'm very comfortable with that. So
Yeah, I am looking at the, excuse me, I didn't mean to just butt in like.
Good, I'm done.
Okay, but I am looking at the natural gas warrant article that we did
2014.
Now, did you just pull that out of your head, or did
No, because last meeting, remember when I said you fibbed when I said that the wrong way? Yeah. I went back and looked, and I found it was 2014. So.
Okay. Yeah, it says, shall the district vote to authorize the school board to enter into a 4-year, so you have to have the term.
Yep.
So you'd have a 10-year lease agreement for the purpose of, providing ventilation for, blah, 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 blah. And then to raise and appropriate the sum of, first year was $187,000 for the first year's payment. It kind of, and this lease agreement contains an escape clause, majority vote required. That's it. And so it kind of begs the question: do you want to? It doesn't show the lease in its entirety, and I don't know if you'd want to structure the lease so you would have some sort of first year's payment.
I mean, if we could do the thing about the bond that's interesting is that you pay I think it's $100,000 the first year, and then subsequent years after that. We could do something like that so that we put something up front. I mean, something small and not really impactful. And through our education, we explain what the remaining years of the lease is like and what it's addressing and stuff. I wouldn't be against.
Yeah, I think I'm much more comfortable with putting, let's say the first year's payment is $100,000, and then we could, and it's a 10-year lease. We'd have that, and then I could run a whole different schedule, and then you could take a look at that to see with the first year's payment being around $100,000, see what that would work out to be, and spreading it over, 10 years.
Yep.
That just feels better for me, and then we could go into the
that's fine.
amortization schedule. So.
Yep. What others think?
Lori.
So I'm with you. The only thing I was thinking is I would love to have the building and planning committee, the planning and building committee, just to be updated on this, and given that committee our rationale on why we want to move forward, because I think it's really important that they're partners with us in a lot of these decisions.
You think you can get them to meet before we have to make a decision?
I'm sure they love meeting.
Well, you're the liaison, so you have the influence there. So
yeah, certainly, take that back to them. Just any other comments on this one? Jenna?
I will keep it simple. I agree with Andy.
Jesus.
And for my
I'm just whittling my whole position down. I also thought the lease was the best option. Yes, faster, better. All the reasons you stated. I don't need to say them again.
Yeah. If you hadn't brought this up, I would have as well. To me, it's kind of a win-win-win. Also, just a reminder, we have a big chunk of debt that's coming off. Matt, what's the amount of that payment that's going to end in
2023, 24,
yeah.
last year? It's around $800,000 that's going away. This year we had around 300 and something thousand, because it was the last year of the high school addition, if anybody even remembers what that is anymore, but the 3 stories.
So essentially, we're kind of swapping it out for some consistency with the tax base, with the tax rate, sorry. So that's another reason that I like it, as well as, essentially, improving the quality of air, I think it's a health aspect, in getting all the work done. I mean, I understand that we still met, the requirements in the classrooms, but that, there's some concerns and some things that need to be improved. And by improving those things, I believe that it's better for our students and for our staff and for their productivity, even an ability to learn, an ability to teach, an ability to work. So for all of those reasons, I support it. Now, do we want to make a motion regarding this now, or do we want to, do we want to do that when we come back?
I guess the question that I have is, we've sort of given we've given Matt the idea that we want to see what a lease warrant article would look like, given some of that. We can't approve it tonight because we haven't seen it. And Lori wants to be able to take it and get the temperature of the planning building committee. So I would imagine, Matt, if you could run something, a mock warrant article in the next day or so, and give it to Lori, and then Lori, either through email or through a meeting with the planning and building, review it before the first, because we have only our next meeting to be able to go through these warrants before we have to give them to the budget committee anyway. So that's how tight the timeline is.
Well, and if you wanted to, we could put it on our special meeting next week if we just want to do a quick touch base on it.
Only if Lori's had the ability to have planning building. If she wants planning building to review it first, then we can't vote a final on it.
I think I can send them an email. I think I can just send them an email and we just want to keep you updated, and I can explain it in an email.
Okay. You're not seeking approval, but rather just to keep them in the loop.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Does that work? So I can, we'll see as we get closer to next week, but I'm happy to put it on as a touch point so we don't get squeezed at the very last minute should we have something else come up.
Well, it feels like we've sort of, in principle, sort of reached agreement on what we want it to, what the warrants to look like in general at this point. It's just crossing the T's and dotting the I's, or said that right.
All right. Is there anything else then regarding the warrant articles that anyone wants to discuss or propose? Shannon.
Well, I just wanted to say that at our last review of the warrant articles on January 8th, we had not yet had the opportunity to go over. There will be, by putting it off till February 1st, we can also go over once MESS has an opportunity to review the agreement. So we've concluded our negotiations, and we're just waiting for the opportunity to ratify on both parties. So I think we'll also have to have that to review at the next one. So.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, anything else? All right, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is board consideration of formal request to governor to prioritize New Hampshire educators and staff for vaccinations. This one came up at the request of board member Lori Rothaus as to whether or not the board would like to send a letter to the governor requesting a further prioritization of educators or those working with children, something to that effect. So I wanted to open that up to see if the board has an appetite for doing that. And if so, then I will go ahead and draft a letter for review on February 1st. Shannon?
I'm in complete support of that. I think some of the notes that came out are that, if you are working the ski patrol and would help a snow bunny, you will get a shot before a teacher who's helping a child in need. And I think that the conflict of interest isn't lost on some of those, knowing that our governor owns a ski resort. So with that, priorities are not being education right now and the children of the state. And that's, if we could take a stand on that, absolutely. And I'm hoping New Hampshire School Boards Association will be doing the same.
Great.
If not, I will be glad to send a separate letter on behalf of that body.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone opposed to doing that? Okay. So then I will move forward with that. I will prepare a draft for either, if we want to get it out sooner, I could put that on Monday as well, or on the 1st. So stay tuned. I will get a draft together and we'll take it from there. Thank you for that suggestion, Lori. I thought it was a great suggestion. It certainly is important to those in our school community that are working so hard, and certainly, you need that vaccine as well. The next item, number 9, is the approval of January 4th, 2021 minutes and the January 5th, 2021 minutes. Well, let's do the 4th first. Do I have a motion? Made by Andy, second by Jenna. Any updates to those minutes? Okay. All those in favor of approving the Monday, January 4th minutes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 500. Now on to the January 5th minutes. Do I have a motion? Andy, made by Andy, second by Shannon. Any updates or comments? All right, then I will, all those in favor of approving the January 5th minutes, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 500. All right, now moving on to the consent agenda.
Okay, on the consent agenda this evening, we have approval of commitment to religious neutrality policy, ACD, and approval of the revised temporary emergency policy travel guidelines for students and staff, EBCVT. That is all.
Do I have a motion? Andy?
I just actually have a point of order. Did we receive any public comments from anybody about the travel policy? I know it was sort of a short leash, but we wanted to give them opportunity, so I'll make a motion that I move that we approve the consent agenda as read with both of those policies being approved.
Do I have a second? By Jenna. Any other comments? Oh, no, we don't want to do that, sorry, with the consent, but so all those signify by saying aye. If you're in favor. All right, the motion carries. Opposed, none. The motion carries 500. Okay, moving on to item number 11. Definitely our housekeeping section. I will start with we've received a number of pieces of correspondence regarding tonight's agenda items. In addition to those that were read in public comments, there were a variety of concerns, as well as there were emails of support. So I wanted to start with that. Anything else? Any other, Shannon and then Jenna?
Received an email from a parent who wanted to find where to better be able to search for the guidelines for having to self-quarantine that's not travel related. So, was in an environment where there was a COVID positive, has to self-quarantine. There's not really anything other than actually technically the travel policy we just voted on that would really talk about the guidelines for, how long and such. So, of course, went back to the school nurse was the one that gave her the verbal on it. And I said, it's good advice. But she said she's hoping to have something at her fingertips. So if it happens on the weekend, she would have known what to do, kind of like a procedural. So on that, sent her back to, but the nurse gave great advice when she talked to her on Tuesday.
Okay, Jenna, you're next.
Yeah, I had an email from a parent asking about the student, I think it was called a school board liaison, and why there wasn't one. And I think that decision was made before I was on the board in the fall, and I thought it was COVID related, which is what I said. But it's funny because that person asked about it, and I had thought about it over the last month, like, wonder when we're gonna reinstate that again or whatever. So the parent was asking about the status of it. I said, this is what I think, but I'll inquire.
Okay. Any other correspondence? Okay, how about comments? John, and then Mark.
No, I think John and I are going to do the same thing. So please, John, if
you begin, Mark, and I will. If you want to begin, I'll jump in, or either way. Or do you want me to just go ahead and talk about the commissioner's visit?
Yeah, I wish you would.
Thank you. So, Bill Morris, our real coordinator, again, just a highlight of Bill's skills in his new role. Did a very nice job organizing a visit with our commissioner virtually. So last Monday, the commissioner joined Bill, myself, and Heather Barker, our director of student services, for about half hour in the morning, and just did an overview of kind of Merrimack's progress, having our own real academy, and how we've started to implement Canvas district wide. And the commissioner was very interested in this because his I Learn New Hampshire initiative is very important to him. So he spent his day in and out of about 5 or 6 classes, met with our technology team and Nancy Rose, and talked about how we've been able to make the progress we have with implementation. And then at the end of the day, Mark joined us, and we had a roundtable with all the teachers' rooms that he visited, and along with Bill, Mark, myself, and Heather. And really, he was amazingly impressed with Merrimack. I think it brought us some very goodwill. I think he highlighted that we are the only full district K to 12 that's implementing Canvas in the first year. And that it's he commended us for our undertaking, and even during a time of a pandemic, that we're still making progress. He was very impressed by the different teachers he visited, and just could not have been more complimentary of Bill and Bill's ability to make a schedule that, one, allowed him to be in and out of classes, and two, maintaining his role as commissioner throughout the day. So overall, a very positive day for our real academy, and a positive day for Merrimack. So thank you.
If I could just add, thank you, John. That was a good summary. He also was. I just want to reiterate his compliments about our teachers, and he really paid close attention. Just one just quick anecdote. I wasn't there, but he was visiting a classroom where students were writing stories and sharing them, and the timing was such that the commissioner or the class ended before this student was able to finish her story. And so she said, I'm gonna, like, some version, I'm gonna follow up with you. Well, she did. She finished her story. She gave it to her teacher, who then emailed it to the commissioner. And it was very, very cute, because she said, I know something like, I know you must be wondering how my story ended. So here it is. And then provided the ending, and then gave it to the commissioner. But he was, noted that we're one of the only districts, if not the only district in the state, that's dedicated a personnel and a program around dealing with the challenges of remote learning. And so I think we should all be pleased about that, and it noted at the state level. So there you go.
Great, thank you. That's great news. Thanks for that update. Any other comments? All right, moving on to new business, number 12. Any new business we need to discuss? Seeing none. Committee reports.
Linda, for new business, I know at our last meeting you mentioned that we were remote this time, then that you would be addressing at our next meeting, which I thought was supposed to be today, if we're going to stay remote or if we were going to go back to town hall, because we're back to hybrid.
Okay, so thank you for that. So I'm going to put that out to the board. That's a good catch.
No problem.
Board, how would you like to handle future meetings?
I would prefer to be in person, just me personally. I just have so much trouble with technology that I would just assume be in person.
Honestly, I'm fine with in person. I think it gives the public the opportunity to advocate personally within the tone. I mean, I'm doing my best to read them off, obviously, but am I inflecting their tone, their intent, the best I can? But of course, I'm reading their words as they were written. So I think it gives us a more organic feedback when it is in person, and I think we do get that value.
Okay, so how about Andy?
So I support the concept of going back in person to, especially from a public comment perspective, but I am personally going to choose to try to access them remotely because of personal situation for the for the time being anyway. So Drew, because even if it's audio, that's fine by me.
Yeah, we have no problem accommodating that, Andy. And I agree with you. And what I would suggest then is we do our special meeting remotely, because that's just too difficult, with, trying to make sure that we get the right time, with town hall, because it's used for other things sometimes, often, right? So I'd propose then we do next week's meeting remotely, and then we resume to in person for the February 1st meeting. And I just also wanted to clarify, in the town hall meeting, there is only room for 11, I think there's 11 spots. So once those spots are full, I don't, we won't be able to let anyone else in. That's the only, concern that I have, but I'm happy with opening it up. And if we can just proceed that way, and we'll make sure that Andy's able to dial in remote beginning on the 1st. Anyone opposed to that? Okay. And then, any other new business? All right, moving on to committee reports. Shannon.
Professional development met on the 14th. Went over some new technology opportunities with Pear Deck, and that has been brought over to the CIT committee to review. So Jenna, sneak preview of your CIT agenda. But it's really just, vetting new technologies that are, looking to be used in some buildings to see its value, and if it's, can work in all buildings, and if it might be, again, running parallel technologies to try to accomplish the same goal. So should be a good discussion for you. Look forward to having it back to our table next month, because we tabled it for that reason. But again, just working on those projects to enhance the educational experience. And on that note, there was also the approval of MES designing an outdoor classroom. So having whiteboards and materials to be able to do some fresh air classroom environments. And I think that's, again, based on what we just talked about 15 minutes ago, not only is it, a good use of space and time and resources, but I think it's going to be, again, an alternate learning environment that will benefit our students. Of course, working on research, working on working on other, you know, hours for getting their research and credits, and then I think that covers it for now. Did I miss anything, John? I think you were there.
No, that was well done. I think that was a good discussion, and I think we covered a lot. And that was it. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other committee reports? Lori?
So I went to the healthcare cost containment committee meeting. It was a Zoom meeting, and it was very interesting. But they had a lot of things for, incentives to keep people, healthy. And they have a lot of really good ideas around health and interventions.
Great, thanks. Thank you. Andy?
Well, just a heads up that starting on Thursday, there's going to be hot and heavy budget committee meetings starting up. So, and they're going to, the first two anyway, are going to be Zoom based. So, I'll be able to give an update. We won't do it at the Monday meeting, but on the first, I'll give an update of where the budget committee's at when it comes to our budget. So,
all right. The budget moves on its life cycle. Any other committee reports? All right. Public comments on agenda items. Shannon?
We have a few, so I will start. We did not get an address from the earlier one, and there's a second one that also came through without an address, to which I sent an email requesting an address and did not hear back as of right now. So we will not be able to enter those two into the record tonight. So I'll start with coming in at 7:47. Erin Alukonis. I hope I did that right. I think I'm going to get a validation one way or another. And it's 6 Mulliken Road in Merrimack. I am writing to address the importance of students returning to school in person. Recently, a petition was put together by hundreds of parents in the town and was sent to the superintendent. After speaking to the woman who initiated the petition, she noted she never received a return correspondence and she feels like voices are not being heard. Based on scientific evidence, we know that school is the safest place for children during this pandemic. A remote option remains available for students who do not wish to return, and it is so important for the children and parents who struggle in the current model to return to school. In parentheses, again, the safest place for children as reported by scientific evidence. There are some students who do well in remote, however, most students do not. We are truly not meeting the needs of many students in the hybrid model, and we need to return our students to school. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my concerns. Best regards, Ellen Elokonis.
Shannon, so I know we're not in the habit of commenting, but I just have to say something there. I absolutely did not receive any such petition. That doesn't mean it wasn't sent. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that I didn't get it. So it maybe went to spam. I get hundreds of emails a day. I'm not suggesting that there haven't been emails that I've missed, but I just can't let that go. The impression that, I willfully did not respond. That is just absolutely not true. So my apologies if such a document was sent to me, but I am not in receipt of it. So that's all I'll say.
Thanks, Mark. The next is from Mike Gagnon, 26 Hillside Terrace. My question to the board is that you say your concern is about the children and they have already had their routines disrupted, and now you want to possibly take their teacher away as well. How can you say they are looking out for the children if they want to take away the one thing that was a consistent? To ask a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old to change teachers mid-year is not acceptable to their already disrupted school year. I am also concerned that K to 4 may not even be able to maintain 3 feet, but are asking parents to put their children in themselves as well as the teachers in this environment. They should not be the guinea pigs to see if it works. The 5 to 12 model can be achieved in K to 4 as well. My wife is a teacher in another district teaching third graders the way it is outlined in the 5 to 12 model proposed. I really feel this should be considered as well. On to, I hope I get this name right too, Tracy Lundstedt at 48 Coda Road. I have a middle school student with a hearing impairment. He has a 504 plan and wears hearing aids all day long at school. I would like to know what the effects of the VDO 360 technology has on students with hearing aids in classroom FM systems. I am just concerned with any possible audio feedback and disruption of learning for him and other students within the classroom. Thank you. Tracy Lundstedt. Next is Corinne Royer. It actually just says McElwain Street. I don't have a number. But it says, Dear members of the school board, I would like you to consider all students in your discussion of returning to school. My son is in 4th grade and has struggled learning remotely / hybrid. He and so many other students would benefit significantly from full in-person learning. Given the option of in-person or remote, it will help give all kids a chance to succeed. If parents don't feel safe feel their children are thriving learning remotely, they still have that option to keep their children remote. Thank you for your time, and I hope that we are able to get our kids back to school soon. Next is from Stu Moncrief at 2 Fields Farm Road. Another public comment. Could somebody please tell Mark the survey sent out to parents did not include an option for hybrid. It was either full remote or full in-time school. It's representing and completely misrepresenting the results of the survey and has no idea how parents who want hybrid may have voted. Next is from Michelle Mackey, 46 Peasley Road. Hello, and thank you for all your efforts. Should we determine that the kids will be going back to school on a full-time basis, what would be the contingency plan should an entire class / classes be exposed to someone that tests COVID positive? Based on the current policy, they would need to be in quarantine for 14 days before coming back to school due to the exposure. What would the learning / school days be like should that happen for those kiddos now at home? Best regards, Michelle Mackey. And then This one, I saw an address, had not received one back. So for those who sent testimony that did not get it read tonight, it's because I did not have an address. You should have an email from me that asks for your address, and then we can have it for our next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Shannon. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Made by Andy, seconded by Lori. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
None. The motion carries 5-0-0. Thank you and good night.
Merrimack TV is committed to our community. From gavel-to-gavel coverage of town and school board meetings to updates on town services and projects, we aim to keep you connected.
Good morning, I'm Kyle Fox, Public Works Director for the town of Merrimack.
Hi, I'm Diane Trippett. I'm the town clerk tax collector for the town of Merrimack.
I'm Captain Matt Tarleton with the Merrimack, New Hampshire Police Department.
And keep the public informed of every motion.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
And many moments, so you can be confident that we're here for you. Thanks for watching. Stay connected. Follow Merrimack TV on Facebook.